My name is Rachel, a 30-year-old employed at a foreign investment firm. I tied the knot with Kevin, my husband, 2 years ago. He serves as a civil servant, though his employment is on a yearly contract basis, causing him annual apprehension over contract renewals. Kevin's family staunchly champions the merits of public service. With retired county workers as parents and a sister currently employed in the city office, their allegiance to public service is unwavering. Consequently, there's a noticeable air of disdain towards my private sector occupation. Living under the same roof since our marriage, they seize every opportunity to diminish the significance of my profession. Isn't it embarrassing to work for a foreign company as an American, especially in finance? Isn't that just about chasing profits? People in private sectors are perceived as those who couldn't secure public service roles, and those in foreign companies are seen as settling because they couldn't land a domestic job. It's a pity, they often remark. It appears that my husband, who was raised in such an environment, also holds public service in high esteem, despite the instability of his position and its modest salary. He remains steadfast in his attachment to this precarious job. Once, during his annual bout of anxiety around fiscal year-end, I ventured to ask Kevin, "Wouldn't you feel more secure with a stable full-time position in a regular company rather than remaining a part-time employee in public service?" His response was resolute. "I'd rather face unemployment than venture into the private sector." Kevin hasn't disclosed his part-time status to his parents, insisting that I maintain the secret as well. Despite lacking a substantial role, he fabricates tales of promotions to uphold his pride. I don't believe he needs to fabricate such stories, but it seems he's striving to earn respect in the eyes of his parents and younger sister by portraying a certain status. Despite never showing me his payslip, the amount deposited into our account suggests his salary is rather modest. With Kevin's recent promotion to section chief, one would expect a significant salary increase, right? How much is he earning now? Caught off guard, Kevin accidentally divulged my salary. However, instead of the anticipated reaction, his father seemed taken aback, questioning, "Is that the standard income nowadays?" While I'm uncertain of the exact salary of a public sector chief, I do know that as a bond trader, my earnings are considerably higher. A notable portion of my earnings comes from commissions. Lately, my performance has been consistently strong, resulting in a salary far surpassing the norm. Upon learning the figures, my husband remarked, while his mother nodded in agreement, "Times have changed, but it's clear Kevin is highly regarded." She seemed visibly pleased. Kevin's sister, employed at the city office, joined the conversation, asserting, "You see, working at the county office guarantees higher earnings for my brother. He might even hold a department head position if he were in the city office." Kevin's discomfort was palpable after inadvertently revealing my salary. Realizing his mistake, he quickly tried to steer the conversation in a different direction. "Oh, by the way, I saw someone from the housing manufacturer around here the other day. Are we planning to remodel the house?" he asked. Indeed, a salesperson from a housing company had recently visited to assist us. Seizing the opportunity to divert the conversation, I suggested, "If we are considering a renovation, I'd recommend focusing on the kitchen." Before I could finish, my mother-in-law cut me off sharply. "No, as the daughter-in-law, you have no place in family discussions. Just keep quiet and follow instructions." It seemed my intimidating mother-in-law disliked everything I did or said, primarily because I wasn't a civil servant. She also resented that I received all of Kevin's salary and gave him an allowance. Believing Kevin's claim that he earned a substantial income, she was convinced I was managing his finances. In reality, Kevin's modest salary mostly funded his personal expenses, while I covered nearly all the household costs. My sister-in-law didn't contribute to the living expenses at all. "Why would you take living expenses from us when we're living on a pension? Kevin is making so much, you don't need it," they would say, refusing to help. They didn't have to pay rent, and I could manage with my salary alone. But it felt unfair. Despite shouldering most of the financial burden, I wasn't allowed to participate in the home renovation discussion this time. So, I retreated to the kitchen to clean up after dinner, promising myself that next time would be different. Neither my mother-in-law nor my sister-in-law helps with the housework, so I hurry home after work to cook, clean, and do laundry. In this respect, working for a foreign-owned company has its advantages. As long as I perform well, there's no need for overtime, allowing me to always leave on time and keep my work and private life separate. Kevin, on the other hand, often brings his work home and spends his days off on his computer. I worry about the security of bringing work data home. When I asked him about it, he snapped, "I can't help it. I get yelled at if I work overtime and even more if I don't finish on time. It's not your concern, so don't butt in." His response was harsh, and he has been particularly grumpy lately, snapping at me whenever I try to talk to him. He even yelled at me when I brought up the housing issue he had been discussing with his parents. Just like Mom always said, it's none of your business. You just need to follow what's been decided. I was growing increasingly frustrated with Kevin's attitude. He never shared anything with me despite my bearing the burden of living expenses and housework. One day, a representative from the construction company came to my in-laws' house with a computer, discussing the layout and other aspects of the house with everyone except me. When I brought them tea and tried to sneak a peek, they immediately yelled, "You don't need to look, just go away." From my brief glance, I was surprised to see what appeared to be the floor plan of a new house, not a renovation of my in-laws' home. For some time, my father-in-law had mentioned that their house was getting cramped and that he wanted to rebuild it, but I had thought he was serious. It seems my in-laws, both retired civil servants, received generous retirement allowances and are planning to build and live in a new house with that money. In addition to their retirement allowances, they haven't spent much of their pension either. Since marrying into the family, I assumed they had ample funds, so I tried to stay out of their financial decisions. However, one thing did bother me. Would Kevin's sister still be living with us in the new home? At 28, it might be time for her to get married, but there hasn't been any discussion about that. It seems highly likely she will continue living with us even after the move. This wouldn't be a problem if she helped with the housework, but she tends to dump all the chores on me and then complains about it, saying, "It's too troublesome." I wish my sister-in-law would get married soon, but recently I overheard my father-in-law discussing plans with the home builder. Can we add extra rooms so that when our daughter finds a husband, they can also live here? Ideally, we'd like a house where my wife and I, our son, our daughter, and her future husband can all live together, he said. I was shocked to hear this, especially since it seemed they were planning for my sister-in-law to live with us even after she marries. I can only imagine how large a house for 3 families would need to be, and it probably wouldn't fit on their current property. Considering that the new house would be built with my in-laws' retirement fund and my sister-in-law's earnings, I have no right to complain. Still, I can't help but think about how much of a hassle it will be to clean such a large house. Then, my husband and his family decided to visit the showcase room and construction site, telling me to stay home because it's none of your business. My mother-in-law shouted at me with a nasty grin, clearly expecting a retort. She looked annoyed when I remained quiet. The construction of the new home proceeded without any information being shared with me, and my in-laws and sister-in-law started preparing to move out. My husband didn't seem to be preparing anything, so I asked, "Don't you need to be getting ready to move?" "Why would I do it? That's your job," my husband snapped back at me. I was taken aback since he hadn't even told me when and where we were moving. From then on, I started preparing for the move whenever I had time, but I made sure to separate my husband's things from mine. The whole new home move-out incident had completely shattered my trust in my husband, and I could no longer bear my mother-in-law's terrible attitude. Even when I asked my husband about our new address, he simply replied, "You don't need to know. Just be prepared." From snippets of conversation during meals, I gathered that the move was imminent, but it was strange that they kept me, the wife, completely in the dark. Perhaps they thought of me as nothing more than a maid. One day, the moving service arrived, and that was when I finally learned we were moving. As I hurriedly cleaned up the breakfast dishes, my mother-in-law remarked, "We're buying new ones, so you can leave those. And are you planning to move into our new home with us?" In that moment, it became clear. They hadn't told me about their new home or the moving date because they intended to kick me out. As I saw my husband standing silently behind my mother-in-law, a smirk playing on his lips, I couldn't help but wonder if he shared her intentions. Well, I had anticipated something like this, so I had already packed my belongings separately, without a trace of agitation. I met her gaze squarely. "I despise everything about you. From now on, we're going to live as a family without you. Do whatever you want," my mother-in-law shouted at me, her tone filled with disdain. My sister-in-law watched with indifference, perhaps expecting me to break down and beg to stay. My mother-in-law's displeasure deepened at my lack of reaction. "You're a parasite, leeching off Kevin's paycheck since the day you got married. Get out now. We need Kevin's salary to pay off the mortgage on our new home, she spat out, her words sharp with resentment. Parasites like you are a nuisance, she seethed, her anger palpable as her face flushed red. While I had already planned on leaving, the revelation about my husband's salary being used for repayment almost made me burst out laughing. My husband appeared shocked, unaware of this arrangement. He gazed at his mother, then downcast, unable to speak the truth. His reaction revealed that my in-laws intended to rely solely on Kevin, whom they perceived as a high earner, to handle the mortgage repayments without tapping into their retirement funds. The prospect of how they would manage the mortgage repayments intrigued me. With a smile, I responded, "Understood. I will divorce Kevin, and you can all move to your new place by yourselves," I declared calmly. My mother-in-law, clearly displeased with my composed demeanor, appeared as though she wanted to say more, but she was ushered out of the house by my father-in-law and sister-in-law. Turning to Kevin, who remained behind, I said, "I'll bring the divorce papers, so give me the address of your new place. I have no idea what your magnificent new home looks like, so I would like to see it once." Reluctantly, he provided me with the address. With little luggage remaining, I cheerfully arranged for a friend to help me move out using her car. I made sure to switch all the bills to be under Kevin's name rather than mine, utilities and everything included. Returning to my parents' house for the time being, I decided to head to the address Kevin had given me to have him sign the divorce papers. Their new house was strikingly large, designed to accommodate 3 generations, with its grand architecture looming impressively. Upon spotting me, my mother-in-law hurried over, shouting, "What are you doing here, you parasitic wife?" Ignoring her tirade, I calmly asked Kevin to sign the divorce papers. Reluctantly, he complied, while his mother continued her verbal assault. "I knew it. A non-civil servant wife is useless. Hurry up and sign, and send her away," she insisted. I couldn't resist a retort. Such a splendid new house. The payments must be quite the burden, aren't they? Can Kevin's salary cover it? I remarked snidely, watching as she read the papers, her anger palpable. "I don't need your concern. Take the divorce papers and leave immediately," she snapped once again. I lingered for a moment, observing my ex-husband's pale expression, but with his mother on the brink of eruption, I swiftly retrieved the divorce papers and filed them at City Hall before embarking on my search for a new home. After all that transpired, the thought of marriage lost its allure, so I opted for a cozy studio apartment to relish living independently. There was a charming spot conveniently close to my workplace, so I wasted no time in making the move. In my new abode, devoid of anyone foisting chores upon me or boasting about civil service, life took on a tranquil hue. Just as I was settling into this newfound peace, an unknown number lit up my phone screen. "Rachel, can you come back to me? I can't keep up with the mortgage payments, let alone the utilities. My phone lines have been cut off, and I'm borrowing my friend's phone to call you." It was none other than my ex-husband, Kevin. Through tears, he pleaded for help, but I couldn't help but feel exasperated. Instead of turning to me, he should have sought assistance from his parents or his sister. So I responded acidly, "Why not ask your sister, who's employed in public service, for support? And what about your parents? Surely they have their retirement savings and Social Security." Kevin's discomfort was evident as he confessed, "Actually, my parents have depleted their retirement savings, and my sister is grappling with her own financial troubles." It turned out that Kevin's parents had fallen prey to an investment scam, losing a significant portion of their retirement funds. Meanwhile, Kevin's sister, under the impression that she didn't need to aid her parents financially, had been recklessly accumulating debt through excessive spending on credit. Upon learning of my occupation in investments, my mother-in-law's demeanor turned openly hostile. Now, I wonder if her animosity stemmed from being swindled in an investment scam. Furthermore, it seems they were keen on upholding their social standing through ostentatious purchases, perhaps to preserve their pride in their public service careers. However, despite their efforts, Kevin's parents found themselves burdened with debt, relying on their Social Security checks to meet their obligations. I was taken aback to discover that Kevin's sister, despite her youth, had amassed significant debt by indulging in purchases of branded goods on credit. The situation took a further downturn when Kevin revealed, "Actually, I've been let go. I'm unemployed now." He had lost his job this year after being caught working remotely with data he had taken from the office. He should have heeded my warning, but it's hardly surprising considering he was taking confidential data out of the office. Even before Kevin lost his job, his family was already grappling with financial difficulties, reliant on my income. Kevin never disclosed to his parents that he was only a part-timer. Likewise, his parents concealed the loss of their retirement funds due to a scam, and even his younger sister kept her substantial debt hidden. In their public service-oriented family, filled with pride, everyone harbored deep secrets that somehow remained hidden as long as I was around. However, after they moved to their new home and I departed, their financial struggles came to light. As a last resort, Kevin reached out to me, seeking assistance. However, I had no desire to reconcile with him, so I firmly declined and ended the call. Despite my refusal, he persisted with repeated calls but eventually ceased after I continued to ignore him. Sometime later, as I passed by their new house, I noticed a for sale sign. Upon speaking with a home builder present at the site, I learned that they were struggling to meet their mortgage payments and had to sell the property quickly. However, they still had outstanding debts. It was ironic considering how they had previously boasted about their financial stability. Yet, when faced with financial difficulties, they swiftly sold their home, placing a burden on a relative who had co-signed the loan. According to the builder, this relative worked in the private sector, exacerbating the family's embarrassment as they were now ostracized by their relatives. Their previous claims of being public servants no longer held weight, and they were looked down upon by their community. Sitting comfortably at home, I couldn't help but smirk at the thought of how the once proud family, now isolated by their relatives and unable to flaunt their public service jobs, were faring.
Dad always said, "Chloe, you're as tough as the old boots I fish in." And he wasn't wrong. Raised in a small town where the winter didn't ask if you were ready before it hit, I grew up pretty fast after Mom passed. All I got of her is a couple of pictures where she's smiling under the brim of Dad's fishing hat, her eyes kind of crinkling at the corners. Dad was a fisherman, started with a beat-up boat that looked like it'd sink if you sneezed too hard. But he had big plans, worked his fingers to the bone, and eventually built up a business that had our name slapped on a huge fish processing plant down by the docks. He was out before sunrise, back after dark, always smelling like the catch of the day. It wasn't like he left me to fend for myself though. Carol, my stepmom, came into our lives when I was about 7. She couldn't have kids of her own, so she poured all that pent-up love into me. We didn't always see eye to eye, especially when I hit those teenage years and got all prickly, but she stuck by me like glue. One night, I remember sitting at the kitchen table with my book spread out, and Dad came in, looking more tired than usual. Carol had fixed him his favorite, salmon, pan-fried just right, and he slumped down at the table, gratefully. "Thanks, love," he said to Carol, then turned to me with a look. "School going okay, kiddo?" "Sakai. Just boring," I shrugged, scribbling something in my notebook. "Boring," she says. "You hear that, Carol? Our girl's gonna be a genius, and she's bored." Dad chuckled, his eyes crinkling like Mom's in those old photos. Carol just smiled, ruffling my hair a bit too roughly. "She'd better be, with college costs these days." That was our life. Simple, sometimes a bit rough, but filled with enough laughter to keep the cold out. When high school was done, I was itching to see more than icy roads and fish. I told Dad I wanted to go to California for college. He wasn't too thrilled at first, all that distance, but he knew I had it in me to make something of myself. "California, huh? You'll melt out there." He'd joke, but one evening, he got serious. We were fixing one of the nets, hands all tangled up in ropes and seaweed. "Dad, I gotta go. It's not enough here for me," I admitted, not wanting to hurt him but needing him to understand. He was quiet for a long moment, just working the ropes. Then, he nodded. "All right, Chloe. You go make us proud. But promise you'll call your old man, huh?" So I went. Off to California with my dreams in one hand and a promise in the other. Maybe I was naive, maybe just young, but either way, I was ready, or so I thought. Stepping off the plane in California, the sun hit me like a slap in the face, warm and bright and relentless. Not a lick of the cold, harsh winds of Alaska. My first thought? Dad was right, I was gonna melt. College was a whole new world. Campus was buzzing with folks from all corners, talking fast about things I hadn't even heard of. I bunked with a girl named Jess, a local who took one look at my flannel and boots combo and said, "You're not in Alaska anymore, girl." "I can see that," I shot back, trying not to feel like a fish out of water. Jess laughed, a good, hearty sound. "You'll fit in just fine. Everyone does eventually." Classes kicked my butt at first. Economics isn't for the faint-hearted, and I had to hustle harder than I thought. Nights were long, coffee-fueled marathons with books and laptops. One day, slumped over a textbook in the library, a guy dropped into the seat opposite me. He had a smile that seemed too easy. "That looks intense. Preparing to take over the world?" "Just trying not to fail my midterms," I said, pushing up the glasses that had slid down my nose. "Ah, the humble student life. I'm Michael, by the way." He extended a hand, and I shook it, noting the firm grip. "Chloe. Nice to meet you," I replied, then went back to my books. Michael was in some of my classes, and we kept bumping into each other. We started having lunch together, sharing complaints about bosses and deadlines. Michael was easy to talk to, made me laugh more than I expected. It wasn't long before we started dating. He was different from the boys back home, smoother, more polished, but with a charm that felt genuine. A few months in, Michael's mom invited us over for dinner. I was nervous, smoothing down my dress, while Michael just grinned and told me, "She's going to love you." His house was nicer than I expected, and his mom, Linda, was all smiles and hugs. She was a bit intense, asking a million questions about Alaska, my dad's business, and my plans for the future. "So, Chloe, Michael tells me you're quite the catch, what with your economics degree and all. You thinking about the long haul with my son here?" she asked, her eyes sharp but not unkind. I choked on my water a bit, coughing while Michael clapped me on the back. "Mom, give her a break," he laughed, but Linda just waved him off. "I'm just saying, it's good to think about these things," she said, serving up more food than I could possibly eat. The night ended with Linda whispering to me as we said goodbye, "You're good for him, Chloe. I can tell." Driving back, Michael was quiet for a long time before he said, "So, what do you think? About us, I mean?" "I like where this is going," I said, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. "Let's see where it leads, okay?" "Okay," he agreed, and for the first time in a long time, California didn't feel quite so far from home. As I lay in bed that night, the distant sound of the ocean in my ears, I thought about Dad and Carol. They'd be happy for me, I figured. Happy that I was finding my way, making connections, maybe even building a future. The wedding was a blur, flowers, smiling faces, and a dress that felt a bit too tight. After all the dancing and cheers, when we finally settled into living at his mom Linda's house, reality started to set in. "Chloe, you'll see, it's easier this way. Mom needs us, and we can save up for our own place," Michael reassured me one evening as we unpacked our wedding gifts in what used to be his old room. "Yeah, I guess you're right," I replied, trying to sound more convinced than I felt. The room still had his high school trophies and old posters on the walls. It didn't feel like ours, it felt like I was just visiting. Things were fine for a while. Linda handled most of the house chores, letting me find my footing at my new job and in this new role as a wife. But about 6 months in, everything changed overnight. "I went to the doctor today, Michael. My back's worse, and he says I need to take it easy," Linda announced one night at dinner, her voice tinged with worry. "Of course, Mom. Chloe and I can take on more around the house, can't we?" Michael said, turning to me. I could only nod, my mind racing with what that meant. Before I knew it, Linda's version of taking it easy meant I was doing everything from cleaning to cooking, with her supervising from a kitchen chair. "You'll want to add more salt to that, dear. Michael likes his food with a bit more flavor," she'd say, watching me fumble around with the spice jars. One day, as I was elbow deep in scrubbing the bathroom, Michael called me. "Hey, Chloe, Mom's really not doing well." I was thinking, maybe you should consider taking some time off work to handle things around here. I stopped scrubbing, the sponge dripping in my hand. "Take time off? Michael, I just started getting the hang of things there," I protested, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. "It's just temporary, babe. For Mom. We need to look out for her," he pushed, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. So, I did it. I quit my job, telling myself it was the right thing to do, the family thing. But days turned into weeks, and my job at the office turned into full-time housekeeping. Linda's health issues seemed to vanish when it came to critiquing my cleaning. I'd vent to Michael when he got home, but it was like talking to a brick wall. "She's just trying to help, Chloe. You know how she is," he'd say, brushing it off, making me feel smaller and more isolated each time. Every day was a marathon of chores. I scrubbed, dusted, and cooked with all the energy I could muster, but Linda always found fault. "You missed a spot there, just behind the couch. And use more elbow grease, will you? It's still not clean," she would say, her voice sharp, cutting through the hum of the vacuum cleaner. Cooking was another battlefield. No matter how carefully I followed recipes or tweaked them to what I thought were her tastes, Linda's verdict was the same. After barely tasting a dish, she'd push her plate away slightly and sigh. "Bland and tasteless, Chloe. You really should take some cooking lessons." Michael, ever his mother's son, only shrugged off my complaints. "Mom's set in her ways, Chloe. She just wants to help you get better at this stuff," he'd say, his words meant to soothe, but only adding salt to my wounds. His indifference stung almost as much as his mother's critiques. One fateful day, the old washing machine decided it had enough. I was halfway through a load of laundry when it shuddered, clanked ominously, and then stopped. Smoke wafted from the motor like a distress signal. The sinking feeling in my stomach matched the silence of the now-dead machine. Linda came rushing in, drawn by the noise. Her reaction was volcanic. "Look what you've done now. That was a perfectly good washing machine, and you've broken it because you can't even operate a simple machine correctly." Her words were like daggers, and her voice rose with every syllable. I stood there, the smell of burnt motor mingling with my rising panic. "Linda, it was very old. It was bound to break down eventually," I tried to explain, my voice meek against her tirade. "That's nonsense. It worked fine before you started using it. This is coming out of your pocket, Chloe. You're costing us so much." She stormed out of the room, leaving me to stare at the defunct appliance, feeling smaller and more helpless than ever. Later, in the quiet of our bedroom, I broached the topic with Michael, hoping for some support or at least a recognition of the unfairness. "The washing machine broke today. Your mom thinks I should pay for a new one," I said, my voice nearly a whisper. He didn't look up from his phone. "Well, can you? It would really help out." "I don't have that kind of money, Michael. You know I left my job," I reminded him, a desperate edge creeping into my tone. "Then ask your dad. He can afford it," he replied casually, as if I were discussing buying a new dress rather than solving a crisis inflicted by his mother. The call to my dad was one of the hardest things I've had to do. I dialed the number, each tone heavy with dread. When he picked up, his voice was a bomb, but it only made things harder. "Hey, kiddo. How's everything with you?" Dad's cheerful greeting twisted my heart. "Hi, Dad. I'm good, but, I need a favor. Can you help me buy a new washing machine? Ours just broke," I said, skipping over the hows and whys. I couldn't bring myself to tell him the whole truth, it felt too much like betrayal. "Of course, Chloe. I'll transfer the money right away. Don't you worry about a thing," he replied, his willingness to help both a relief and a burden. When the money came through, Linda oversaw the purchase of a new, top-of-the-line washing machine, boasting of its features to anyone who would listen. Before long, things went from bad to unbearable. It started with her asking for money to cover minor repairs around the house, a leaky faucet here, a cracked tile there. But soon, those small demands escalated into full-blown renovations. "Chloe, this house deserves to look its best. We need to live in a place that reflects our status," Linda would assert, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to upgrade her living room or the kitchen on a whim. I tried to resist, to suggest we budget or delay some of the work, but she brushed off my concerns with a wave of her hand. The first few times I called Dad to ask for money, I felt a knot in my stomach. He always answered with a smile, happy to see me, even if it was just on a screen. "How's my girl?" he'd ask, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I'm good, Dad. Listen, I need to ask for some help. We've got some repairs to do around the house, and well, it's a bit more than we can handle right now," I'd say, trying to keep my voice steady. Dad never hesitated, always quick to offer whatever help he could. "Of course, kiddo. I'll transfer the money today. You just make sure you're taking care of yourself, alright?" But Linda's demands grew. One video call turned into weekly sessions where she'd hover in the background, making sure I looked presentable. "Put on some makeup, Chloe. Look lively for your father," she'd command, covering up the fatigue that had become my constant companion. It wasn't just the house that was being transformed. Linda decided she needed a new car, something more fitting for her status. And then, clothes from branded stores, because appearances matter, Chloe. Each request for money chipped away at my independence and my relationship with my father. I felt like a puppet, reciting lines Linda had given me. She made sure I never had a moment alone during those calls. If I even hinted at needing to talk to Dad in private, she'd find a way to interrupt or end the conversation quickly. Michael wasn't any help. He'd come home late, often smelling of booze, shrugging off my attempts to talk about how out of control things were getting. "It's what families do, Chloe. They help each other out," he'd slur, dismissing my concerns. Then I found out I was pregnant. It should have been a moment of joy, but my heart sank knowing how Linda would react. True to form, when I told her, her first response was not congratulations, but calculation. "This is wonderful news. Think of all the things the baby will need. You'll have to talk to your father, we'll need to set up a nursery, and babies need so much stuff," Linda enthused, already listing things to buy. Her excitement wasn't about the baby, it was about the new avenue for requests for money. "Make sure to look happy when you tell him. We want to make sure he's willing to help out with everything the baby needs," she instructed me before another choreographed call to my father. Sitting there, waiting for the screen to connect, I felt the lowest I had ever felt. I was about to bring a child into this mess, into this cycle of dependency and deceit that I couldn't seem to break free from. "Hey, Dad," I began, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "I have some news, I'm going to have a baby." Dad's face lit up, a genuine moment of happiness in the charade my life had become. "That's wonderful, Chloe. Absolutely wonderful. You know I'll support you in any way I can." Living with Linda and Michael had become unbearable, but it grew worse after the birth of my baby. The days and nights merged into an endless cycle of demands, criticisms, and exhaustion. Michael was hardly ever home, and when he did show up, his presence only added to the tension. "You've really let yourself go, haven't you?" Michael would sneer, eyeing me as if I were a stranger, not the mother of his child. "You look like an elephant. I can't even stand to sleep next to you." His words cut deeper than knives, leaving scars no one could see. I cried most nights, silently, the sobs shaking my body while I tried to muffle the sound with a pillow so as not to wake the baby or attract Linda's attention. The baby didn't sleep well, up at all hours, crying more often than not. I was running on fumes, every day a test of my endurance. One particularly tough day, I was so exhausted that I fell asleep while a casserole was in the oven. The smell of burning woke me, but not before Linda stormed into the kitchen. "What on earth are you doing? You're wasting food, Chloe." Do you know how hard I worked to provide for this family? Linda screamed as she yanked the blackened casserole from the oven. I just fell asleep for a moment. I didn't mean to, I stammered, trying to apologize. No excuses. You're not eating today. Maybe that will teach you to pay attention, Linda decreed, her voice cold and unforgiving. I was stunned, the hunger already gnawing at me. But worse was knowing I needed nutrition to breastfeed my baby, who depended entirely on me. Yet, I felt powerless to argue with her, the fear of further reprisal keeping me silent. That same night, Michael came home drunk. He stumbled through the door, his eyes barely focusing on me as I tried to soothe our crying baby. Can't you keep that child quiet? He barked, his voice laced with venom. I'm trying, Michael. He's just fussy tonight, I said, my voice weary, holding our baby a little closer. Unsatisfied and belligerent, Michael pushed me, his hand shoving against my shoulder hard enough that I stumbled and hit the doorframe. Pain shot through me, but my first instinct was to protect the baby in my arms. That moment crystallized everything for me. The fear, the pain, the desperation, I couldn't live like this anymore. Not for me, not for my baby. This wasn't a home, it was a prison. Michael's stumble seemed minor to him, but to me, it was the last straw. Waiting for the right moment to leave was the hardest part. I watched the clock tick, each minute stretching endlessly until the notification came, another transfer of money from my dad. It was then I knew I had to make my move. Michael and Linda were both out for the day, and the house felt strangely silent, almost like it was holding its breath along with me. I dressed quickly, pulling on my old warm jacket and wrapping my baby tightly in his blanket. Every movement was calculated, silent, the fear of them coming back early gnawing at my insides. I grabbed a small bag that I had packed days ago, the essentials only, some clothes for me, and the baby in diapers. With my baby secured in my arms, I stepped outside, locking the door behind me one last time. The taxi ride to the airport was a blur, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. I kept looking over my shoulder, paranoid that Michael or Linda might pull up behind us. At the airport, I bought the tickets, my hands shaking as I handed over the cash. The amount drained nearly all the money I had, but it didn't matter. We were going to be safe, we were going to be free. I turned off my phone, cutting off any chance they had to track me down or persuade me to come back. Landing in Alaska was like stepping into another world. The biting cold slapped me awake from the haze of anxiety and fear that had clouded my mind. I hailed another taxi and gave the driver my dad's address. As we drove, the familiar landscapes of my childhood rolled past, each mile bringing a surge of memories and a flicker of hope. I arrived at my dad's house late at night. The porch light was a beacon in the darkness. With my baby now asleep against my chest, I walked up the steps and rang the doorbell. The wait felt like an eternity. Then, the door swung open, and there was my dad, his face etching from confusion to shock as he took in my appearance, exhausted, disheveled, my eyes swollen from crying. "Chloe, what's happened? Are you okay?" His voice was laden with concern. Tears streamed down my face as I stepped inside. "Dad, I had to leave. I couldn't stay there any longer. Please, I need your help." He didn't ask any more questions. He just wrapped his arms around me and my baby, pulling us into the warmth of the house. Carol came down the stairs, her expression turning from sleepy curiosity to alarm as she saw me. "Oh, Chloe," she gasped, rushing to embrace us. "What's going on?" I broke down, the story pouring out of me in between sobs, the control, the isolation, the despair, Michael's indifference, Linda's manipulation. They listened, their faces growing grim with every detail. Without a word, Dad stepped away and came back with his phone in hand. He dialed with a steadiness that belied his age. "I'm calling the police, and then I'm getting the best lawyer we can afford. We're going to fix this, Chloe. You're safe now. You're home." The courthouse was a blur of activity, but inside, the world seemed to slow down as I took the stand. Giving my testimony against Michael and his mother, Linda, was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. My voice shook as I recounted the details of the abuse and manipulation, but I felt a strength I didn't know I had, fueled by the desire to protect my child and reclaim my life. The judge's gavel sounded like a shot of finality when he fined Michael for his abusive behavior. It wasn't just a victory for me, it felt like justice for every silent moment I had endured under his and Linda's control. The divorce papers came through not long after. Signing them brought a mix of relief and sorrow. This wasn't how I had envisioned my marriage ending. But as I scribbled my name, I knew it was the first step toward a new beginning. Mr. Jenkins, our lawyer, was relentless. He dug through financial records and bank statements, piecing together the puzzle of how my father's money had been siphoned off to fund Linda's lavish tastes and renovations. The evidence was undeniable, and the court ordered that every penny be returned. The total came to over $230,000. Neither Michael nor Linda had the means to pay it back outright. The news of their deceit spread quickly among their friends and the local community, tarnishing their reputations severely. Michael struggled to find any substantial work after that, his previous employers distancing themselves from the scandal. In the end, they were forced to sell the house, Linda's pride and joy, the symbol of their greed. They moved into a small, cramped apartment in a less desirable part of town. Linda had to pick up a job at a local grocery store, a far cry from the leisurely life she had manipulated to maintain. Custody of my son was granted to me without contest. Michael was ordered to pay alimony, which he does, albeit begrudgingly. It's not about the money, though. It's about providing a stable and loving environment for my son, something I am now able to do back in the safety and comfort of my father's home. As I watch my son play in the yard, his laughter mingling with the wind, I feel a surge of hope for the future. The legal battles, the escape, the recovery, it's all behind us now. We've emerged stronger, bound by a resilience forged in the fires of adversity. The stench of burnt rubber and disappointment filled the air as I glared at the lifeless hood of my car. It was supposed to be a quick dash to meet a new client, not a roadside breakdown on a deserted highway. I sighed, pulling out my phone and dialing roadside assistance. The robotic voice on the other end promised a wait time of at least an hour. Just as frustration threatened to boil over, a beat-up pickup truck screeched to a halt behind me. A grease-stained hand emerged from the driver's side, followed by a man with a grin as wide as his overalls. "Car trouble, huh?" he drawled, his voice warm and friendly. "You could say that," I replied, a touch of exasperation in my voice. "Looks like I'm stuck here for a while. I'm Nellie." He chuckled. "Don't worry, ma'am. I'm Alex, and this here is my territory. Most likely fix you right up." He worked quickly, his movements efficient and practiced. As he replaced the battery, we fell into conversation. I learned about his auto repair shop, a local gem known for its honesty and fair prices. He, in turn, listened patiently as I explained the world of investment portfolios and stock markets. "Sounds complicated," he said with a scratch of his head. "All that fancy math and paper pushing. Gimme a good old wrench and a rusty engine any day. At least I can see what I'm working with, real things, not some numbers on a screen." I snorted. "Don't knock it till you try it, Alex. Investments are the future. They allow people to grow their wealth, secure their dreams." We continued to debate the merits of his wrenches versus my spreadsheets as he finished the job. By the time my car roared back to life, the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. "Thanks, Alex," I said, shaking his hand, a warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the now functional engine. "Actually, I was wondering, maybe you'd like to grab a coffee sometime? Not to talk cars and investments, but just, to chat?" The surprise on his face quickly melted into a smile. "Coffee sounds good," he replied, scratching the back of his neck. "How about tomorrow morning? My treat, as a thank you for putting up with my greasy fingers on your fancy car." We exchanged numbers, and as I drove away, the setting sun felt a little brighter, the future a little less certain, but a whole lot more exciting. A year flew by in a whirlwind of greasy spoon dinners, late-night strategy sessions, and stolen kisses under starlit skies. We married in a simple ceremony, surrounded by close friends and the slightly bewildered gazes of Alex's family. His parents were kind, old-fashioned folks, but his sister, Sarah, however, was a different story entirely. At 28, she was a permanent resident at their house, her days spent flitting between manicures and shopping sprees, funded entirely by her parents' generosity. The first few months of married life were a blissful blur. We settled into a cozy starter home near Alex's parents' place, a practical choice according to him. My dreams, however, stretched far beyond the picket fence. I envisioned a sprawling mansion, a testament to the financial empire I was building, complete with a gleaming basketball court for the future mini-me's I yearned for. Sunday dinners at Alex's parents' house were an exercise in forced cheer. Sarah, draped in the latest designer outfit and sporting a fresh manicure, would regale us with tales of her weekend getaway to some exotic locale. Her parents beamed with pride, oblivious to the growing strain on their finances. One particularly tense Sunday, after Sarah had announced her plans for a month-long European cruise, Alex's dad, a kind-faced man named Henry, cleared his throat and spoke hesitantly. "Alex, son," he began. "Since we retired, things have been a bit tighter than we expected. We were hoping." His voice trailed off, his eyes pleading. Alex, ever the dutiful son, immediately understood. "Sure, Dad. How much do you need?" My stomach lurched. Here we go again, I thought, bracing myself for another financial dance with Sarah's bottomless pit of needs. "Just a little help to get us through," Henry mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "Retirement ain't exactly what it's cracked up to be on a fixed income." "Don't worry, Dad," Alex said reassuringly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We'll take care of it." Later that night, as we lay in bed, I couldn't hold back any longer. "Alex," I said softly, "how much are you giving them this time?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, honey, it's family. They need a little help, that's all." "A little help every month adds up, Alex," I pointed out. "And what about Sarah's little European jaunt? Don't you think they might need that money more?" Alex bristled. "Don't you start with Sarah. It's none of your business how she spends her money." "It becomes my business," I shot back, my voice rising, "when it affects our finances. We're a team, remember? And frankly, I'm tired of feeling like an ATM for your entire family." The words hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the comfortable silence that usually filled our bedroom. Alex's jaw tightened. "You just don't understand what family means," he said, his voice laced with anger. "You have no relatives, so you wouldn't get it." That hit me like a sucker punch. It was true, I didn't have any family. My parents had passed away when I was young, leaving me a small inheritance that I had used to put myself through college. But the lack of a family wasn't a choice I had made, and it certainly didn't make me any less capable of understanding loyalty and love. One Tuesday evening, the phone rang, shattering the fragile peace in our house. It was Sarah, her voice choked with sobs. "It's Dad," she stammered. "He's in the hospital. Cancer. They say it's bad." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Alex, his face pale, grabbed the phone from my hand and spoke in hushed tones. When he hung up, his eyes were red-rimmed. "He's not going to make it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The doctors are giving him a few weeks, maybe a month at most." The next few weeks were a blur of hospital visits, tear-filled goodbyes, and whispered promises. As the inevitable drew closer, the question of the funeral arrangements loomed large. One evening, Sarah, her eyes red and puffy, announced, "I've talked to the funeral home. It's going to be a bit expensive, but Dad deserves the best, right?" Alex, still raw with grief, readily agreed. "Of course, honey, whatever it takes." "It comes to..." Sarah hesitated, then blurted out, $50,000. My jaw dropped. $50,000 for a funeral? That seemed like a staggering sum, especially considering the modest means of Alex's parents. 50,000? I echoed, unable to contain my surprise. Isn't that a bit excessive? Alex shot me a withering look. Don't be insensitive, Nellie. It's Dad's funeral. We have to honor him properly. Can't you just be supportive for once? The accusation stung. Supportive? I had spent the past few weeks juggling work and hospital visits, all while trying to navigate the emotional minefield that was his family. But apparently, that wasn't enough. Look, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. $50,000 is a lot of money. Maybe we should talk to your mom and see what she thinks. Before I could finish my sentence, Alex exploded. Don't you dare bring Mom into this, he roared. This is about family, and you clearly don't understand what that means. You only care about money. His words were a slap in the face. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. Here we were again, at the same impasse. My attempt at financial responsibility construed as greed, my concern for his family dismissed as cold-heartedness. The sting of defeat lingered long after I transferred the $25,000 to Alex. Swallowing my pride and doubts, I did it for us, for our future. Maybe, I naively hoped, this would be the olive branch that ended the fight and brought us back together. But Alex, it seemed, had other plans. That night, he packed a duffel bag, his face etched with a stony resolve. Where are you going? I asked, my voice barely a croak. I need to be with Mom, he said curtly. She's taking this really hard. But what about us? I pleaded, a desperate hope flickering in my chest. He didn't answer. Just a gruff goodbye and the slam of the front door, leaving me alone in the echoing silence of our once happy home. The next few days were a blur of tearful phone calls to Alex's mom, unanswered texts, and a gnawing emptiness that settled in my gut. Finally, I received a call from the funeral home, a reminder of the looming farewell. Wiping away a fresh wave of tears, I dressed in black, the weight of the unresolved conflict a heavy burden on my shoulders. Arriving at the funeral home, a cold dread slithered down my spine as I noticed the deserted parking lot and the closed doors. Excuse me? I stammered, approaching the receptionist, a kind-faced woman with weary eyes. Yes, ma'am, she replied politely. I'm here for the service of Mr. Henry Johnson? I inquired, my voice trembling slightly. She consulted the ledger on her desk, her brow furrowing slightly. The service for Mr. Johnson concluded yesterday, dear. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Yesterday? But My voice trailed off, confusion clouding my thoughts. Alex didn't tell me. The woman offered a sympathetic smile. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding. It was a simple cremation, as per the family's wishes. Cremation? The image of the extravagant funeral Sarah had described sent a jolt through me. $50,000 for a cremation? The pieces just weren't fitting. Anger, cold and sharp, began to replace the initial shock. Furious and confused, I stormed out of the funeral home, the receptionist's words echoing in my head. The betrayal gnawed at me, a bitter pill to swallow. Where was Alex? Why hadn't he told me? More importantly, where did all that money go? With a burning determination, I steered my car towards Alex's childhood home. Pulling into the driveway, I saw him emerging from his car, a glint of surprise flashing across his face. Alex! I shouted, flinging open the car door. What is going on? Where did all this money go? And why wasn't I informed about the change in plans? You didn't care, he shot back, his voice laced with hurt and accusation. You only think about money, never about family. The audacity of his words left me speechless. Family? I echoed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Since when does family lie and manipulate? The anger simmered within me, threatening to boil over. Before I could unleash a torrent of accusations, Alex reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a legal document, the stark black letters screaming at me, divorce papers. You want a divorce? I asked, the question catching in my throat. I can't live with someone so indifferent, he stated, his jaw clenched. You have your investments and stocks, but you have no heart. I put the house up for sale. We'll split the proceeds. His words felt like a physical blow. The life we had envisioned, the dreams we had shared, all dissolved in a single, acrimonious conversation. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. With a final glare at his retreating figure, I stormed towards my car, my every step fueled by a righteous anger. Just as I reached the driveway, a flash of red caught my eye. Sarah, her face plastered with a wide, fake smile, strutted towards the house, a gaggle of designer shopping bags swinging in her arms. And parked right beside her, gleaming in the afternoon sun, was a brand new sports car. What the hell, Sarah, I barked, my voice laced with ice. Where'd you get the dough for that beauty? Sarah's smile faltered for a split second, then returned with a touch of defiance. Oh, hey, Nellie, she drawled, feigning surprise. This? Inheritance, honey. Dad left me a little something extra. Her words were unconvincing. There was no trace of grief on her face, no mourning in her eyes. Just a smug satisfaction that grated on my every nerve. Ignoring the urge to confront her, I stormed towards my car, the image of the divorce papers burning a hole in my pocket. There was only one place I needed to go. The familiar chime of the funeral home door announced my arrival. Behind the reception desk sat Emily, a classmate from high school. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. Emily, thank God it's you, I blurted, rushing towards her. Hey, Nellie, she said, a smile stretching across her face. What brings you here? It's a long story, I sighed, forcing a smile. Instead of launching into the whole mess, I cut to the chase. I need some information about a recent service, Mr. Johnson. Emily quickly pulled up the file on her computer. Ah, yes. Cremation, as per the family's wishes. Is there anything else I can help you with? My heart hammered in my chest. Cremation? I echoed, the word tasting foreign on my tongue. The cost? Emily tapped a few keys on the keyboard. The total came to $5,237. I can print you a duplicate copy of this receipt, if that would be helpful. Relief flooded me. Yes, please, I croaked, my voice thick with emotion. Thank you, Emily. You have no idea what this means to me. My knuckles were white-hot as I gripped the steering wheel, the evidence burning a hole in my pocket. The facade of Alex's childhood home mocked me with its familiarity. Taking a deep breath, I marched towards the front door, my purpose fueling my steps. The moment I stepped inside, the first thing I saw was Alex, Sarah perched beside him like a bad omen. His mother sat on the couch, a tear-stained tissue clutched in her hand. The air crackled with a tense silence. Hey everyone, I greeted, my voice surprisingly steady. Alex's mother, her eyes red-rimmed, looked up with a flicker of surprise. Oh, Nellie, why weren't you at the service yesterday? Service? I scoffed. No one told me it was postponed. I thought it was today. I offered Alex's mother my condolences, a hollow gesture at best, and then turned to Alex. Can we talk in private? I asked, my voice low. There are no secrets in this family, he shot back, his jaw clenched. Especially not from someone who isn't considered family anymore. His words stung, but I refused to let him get under my skin. Reaching into my purse, I pulled out the check and slammed it on the coffee table in front of him. Here's the money for the funeral, I stated, my voice firm. Now, where'd the rest of it go? Alex stared at the check, his brow furrowed in confusion. What rest of it? Don't play dumb with me, I snapped. The check is for $50,000. The funeral home said the service cost $5,000. Explain. The confusion on Alex's face seemed genuine. His eyes darted towards his sister, a silent question hanging in the air. This is ridiculous. Sarah sputtered, jumping to her feet. You just can't come in here throwing accusations around. But her outburst backfired. Alex's mother, who had been silently observing the exchange, spoke up. Wait, she said, her voice shaky. Your father had some money saved for his funeral. And I gave Sarah $10,000 to help with the arrangements. I did a quick mental calculation. $50,000 from us, plus $10,000 from you, Mom, that's $60,000. The service cost $5,000. Where's the remaining $55,000? My gaze landed on Sarah, a question mark etched on my face. Sarah's carefully constructed facade crumbled. Her cheeks flushed crimson, and she shifted uncomfortably under my stare. Finally, she mumbled, well, I just saw this amazing car, and I couldn't resist. Instead of the anger I expected, Alex placed a comforting hand on Sarah's shoulder. Hey, he murmured. It's not a big deal. You just needed a new car. We can figure something out next time. My blood ran cold. Not only had Sarah stolen the money, but Alex was condoning her actions? Did he not see the gravity of the situation? Not a big deal? I repeated, my voice laced with incredulity. She stole money, Alex. From her own father's funeral fund. Alex glared at me, his voice icy. You wouldn't understand, Nellie. You don't have family. You only care about money. His words hit me like a physical blow. The anger simmering inside me boiled over. I slammed the signed divorce papers in front of him. Take them, I spat, my voice trembling with rage. And then tell your precious sister to give me back my $25,000. Otherwise, I'll sue her for fraud. Alex opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand, silencing him. You know what, Alex? Save it. There's nothing left to say. The weight of the past few days finally settled on my shoulders, a crushing burden. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. But I blinked them back, refusing to crumble in front of them. 2 weeks flew by in a blur of paperwork and emotional turmoil. The house, once a symbol of our future, sat on the market. Then, one sunny afternoon, the doorbell rang. Opening the door, I was met with Sarah, a defiant glint in her eyes. Here, she said, shoving a thick envelope into my hand. Your precious money. Happy now? Her smug demeanor ignited a flicker of anger within me. Don't act like you're doing me a favor, I retorted. That money was meant to honor your father's memory, not fuel your shopping sprees. She rolled her eyes, clearly unfazed by my words. Whatever, she muttered, turning to leave. Just don't come crying to me when you realize you're all alone and nobody loves you. The house eventually sold, and the money was split with Alex. The divorce became final, a clean break from a toxic past. Months passed, filled with new experiences and a newfound sense of freedom. Then, one day, the phone rang. The caller ID displayed Alex's number, a number I'd long since deleted from my memory. Hesitantly, I picked up. Hello? Hey Nellie, came Alex's voice, laced with a desperation I hadn't heard before. I need your help. What kind of help? I asked, already dreading the answer. It's Sarah, he sighed. She got into some serious debt, gambling debts, mostly. The creditors are after us, Nellie. They've already taken the house, the car repair shop. What do you mean us? I clarified, my voice tight. You and Sarah are no longer us, Alex. We're divorced, remember? Come on, Nellie, he pleaded. Don't be like that. You have money, you can help us out. Besides, you're all alone anyway. No kids, no family, nobody needs you. His words felt like a slap in the face. All the progress I'd made, all the independence I'd built, dismissed in a single, insensitive sentence. Anger, hot and righteous, surged through me. Nobody needs me? I echoed, my voice low and dangerous. Let me tell you something, Alex. I may not have a husband or kids, but I have friends, hobbies, and a life that doesn't revolve around cleaning up the messes of manipulative siblings? The answer is no, Alex. Absolutely not. And don't you ever call me again. With that, I slammed the phone down, the finality of the click echoing in my ears. There would be no second chances, no desperate pleas. I had built my own family, a family of friends, of experiences, of personal growth. And that, I realized, was more than enough. Years of experience had honed my intuition into a finely tuned instrument, and the melody it played was one of prosperity. The reward for my dedication? A sprawling new house on the city's fringe, a testament to my self-reliance and blooming independence. As I unwound on a plush chaise lounge, a cool glass of Sauvignon Blanc in hand, a wave of satisfaction washed over me. This was the life I had built, brick by brick, on the foundation of self-belief. The tranquility was broken by the insistent buzzing of my phone. An unknown number flickered on the screen. Usually, such calls were met with a dismissive silence, but a strange sense of unease gnawed at me. With a sigh, I swiped the answer button. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. A smooth, unfamiliar voice flowed through the receiver. "Is this Nellie?" My mind raced, searching for a connection to the voice. It held a hint of amusement, a touch of flirtation. "Yes, speaking," I replied, my voice regaining its usual confidence. "This is Michael," the voice continued, "from the gallery down on Elm Street. We met a few weeks ago at the opening, remember? The one with the abstract expressionist exhibit?" A memory flickered to life. The opening, the vibrant paintings, the man with the captivating smile and a passion for obscure French filmmakers. A smile tugged at the corner of my lips. "Michael, right. Of course, I remember." "Excellent," he chuckled. "Listen, I was wondering if you might be free for dinner this Friday? There's this new tapas place I've been dying to try, and—" "Sounds perfect," I replied, a genuine smile warming my voice. "What time should I pick you up?" "No need for that," he countered. "Let me be the gentleman. I'll swing by your place at 8. Looking forward to it, Nellie." The call ended, and I cradled the phone, a giddy feeling bubbling in my chest. Life wasn't just about financial success, it was about building connections, fostering new experiences. And as I gazed out at the breathtaking sunset, the future stretched before me, an open road brimming with endless possibilities, and a man named Michael waiting to share the journey. Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah, and I want to tell you about the time when my life took a surprising turn. I was 25 years old, working as an accountant at a company where I met Tom. Tom was the head of the marketing department, a pretty serious guy, but with a charm that was hard to miss. At first, Tom and I were just colleagues. We exchanged polite hellos and discussed work stuff now and then. He was always busy, and I was too focused on my tasks to think much about him. But things changed at one of our company parties. It was one of those annual events where everyone let loose a little. The party was lively, with music blasting and people dancing everywhere. I wasn't much of a dancer, so I decided to take a break on the balcony, away from the noise. That's when Tom joined me. We chatted for a bit about work and the usual small talk. I noticed how his serious demeanor from the office melted away into a more relaxed and friendly vibe. We started talking about our lives outside work, our interests, and what we liked to do for fun. "So, what do you do for fun, Tom? I can't imagine you being anything but serious," I teased. He laughed. "Well, I enjoy hiking and playing the guitar. I guess I'm not all work and no play after all." As the conversation flowed, there was a moment of silence. We looked at each other, and without thinking, we leaned in and kissed. It was spontaneous, unexpected, but it felt natural. Pulling back slightly, Tom looked a bit surprised. "Wow, I didn't see that coming," he said, a bit breathless. "Me neither," I admitted, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. "But it felt right, didn't it?" "Yeah, it did," he agreed, smiling. The next day at work, there was a different energy between us. We started spending more time together, having lunch, and going for coffee breaks. Our first date was simple yet perfect. We went to a cozy little restaurant downtown. We talked for hours about everything, our childhood, our dreams, our fears. It felt like we had known each other forever. 2 years flew by, filled with countless memories and shared moments. One day, Tom suggested we take a trip to Hawaii. I was thrilled. Little did I know, he had something big planned. On the last evening of our trip, as the sun set on the beautiful beach, Tom got down on one knee and pulled out a ring. "Hannah, you've made me happier than I ever thought possible. Will you marry me?" I was overwhelmed with emotion. "Yes, Tom, I will," I said, tears of joy streaming down my face. We returned home, and the preparations for our wedding began. It was a whirlwind of excitement and planning. Tom introduced me to his parents, Nancy and John. They were a kind and welcoming couple, and I felt instantly at ease with them. We had a simple wedding, but filled with lots of laughter and joy, especially thanks to Tom's huge, fun-loving family. I never knew he had so many relatives who loved to party. After the wedding, Tom moved into my house, the one I inherited from my grandfather. It wasn't huge, but it was cozy, and I loved it. Tom insisted I become a housewife, and after thinking it over, I agreed. The idea of taking care of our home and spending more time with Tom sounded nice. The first 6 months of our marriage were like a dream. We were inseparable, spending every moment together. We'd go for long walks, binge-watch our favorite shows, and just enjoy each other's company. The house felt so peaceful, and I loved making it our own little nest. Tom's parents, Nancy and John, started visiting us more often. They'd drop by unannounced, but I didn't mind too much at first. It was nice having them around, and they seemed to enjoy our company too. They often talked about their small rented apartment and how cramped it was. One evening, while we were having dinner, Nancy sighed heavily. "I just wish we had more space, you know? That apartment is just so tiny." John nodded in agreement. "Yeah, it's getting a bit claustrophobic." I tried to be sympathetic. "I'm sure it's not that bad. At least you have each other, right?" They laughed, but I could tell they weren't entirely happy with their living situation. Still, I didn't think much of it at the time. I was too focused on enjoying my life with Tom. As the weeks went by, Tom's parents continued to visit frequently. They'd stay for dinner and often hinted about how nice it would be to live in a bigger place. I tried to brush it off, focusing on the positive aspects of our time together. One afternoon, while I was preparing dinner, Nancy dropped by unexpectedly. "Hi Hannah, I thought I'd keep you company while you cook." "Sure, Nancy. I could use the company," I replied, trying to sound cheerful. She wandered around the kitchen, looking at everything. "You know, this house is really nice. So much space and so cozy." "Thanks, Nancy. I really love it here." She sighed again. "Our place is just so small. It's hard to even move around sometimes." I felt a bit uncomfortable but didn't say anything. I didn't want to be rude. After all, they were Tom's parents, and I wanted to keep the peace. As the months passed, I noticed Tom was spending more time talking about his parents and their living situation. He'd bring it up during our dinners and casual conversations. "Hannah, my parents really struggle in that tiny apartment. It's not fair for them, you know?" "I get it, Tom. But they seem to manage, right?" "Yeah, but still, I wish there was more we could do for them." I nodded, not knowing what else to say. I wanted to support Tom, but I also didn't want to disrupt the peace and comfort of our home. I hoped things would just work themselves out. One day, Tom came home and casually said, "Hannah, my parents need to stay with us for a couple of weeks. Their apartment is getting renovated." I blinked, a bit taken aback, but wanting to be supportive. "All right, Tom, I guess we can handle that," I replied, trying to stay positive. I figured I could get along with Nancy and John since they seemed nice enough. A few days later, I saw a massive truck pull up outside our house. Movers started unloading a ton of furniture and boxes. I stood there, watching in disbelief as they filled our house with their stuff. "What's all this?" I muttered to myself, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. Nancy and John arrived soon after, looking cheerful. "Thanks for letting us stay, Hannah," Nancy said, patting me on the shoulder. I forced a smile. "Sure, but why didn't you rent a storage room for all this stuff?" Nancy waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, I don't trust strangers with my things. It's just for a couple of weeks." I nodded, trying to hide my growing unease. For the first few days, they were polite and thanked me for letting them stay. I even started to relax a bit, thinking maybe it wouldn't be so bad after all. Tom suggested we have a family dinner to welcome them properly. I agreed, thinking it might help ease the tension. The night of the dinner, I worked hard to make everything perfect. I cooked a nice meal and set the table nicely. As we all sat down, Nancy and John seemed pleased. "Thank you, Hannah, this is lovely," Nancy said, smiling. I smiled back, feeling a bit more at ease. "I'm glad you like it. Welcome to our home." The dinner went smoothly, with everyone chatting and laughing. I started to think maybe this arrangement could work after all. Tom's parents seemed grateful, and I hoped we could all get along well during their stay. But as the days went by, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being overwhelmed by all their stuff crowding our house. Every room seemed to be filled with their belongings, and it felt like our space was shrinking. I tried to stay positive, reminding myself it was only for a few weeks. Despite the growing clutter, I continued to focus on keeping the peace. I cleaned up after them, cooked their meals, and tried to be a good hostess. Tom seemed pleased with how things were going, which helped me stay positive. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, Tom came into the kitchen. "Hannah, thanks for making this work. I know it's not easy having my parents here." I wiped my hands on a towel and smiled at him. "I'm doing my best, Tom. I just hope it's only for a couple of weeks like you said." "It will be, I promise," he assured me. I nodded, feeling a bit reassured. I hoped Tom was right and that this arrangement would be temporary. I could handle a few weeks, I told myself. As the days passed, I tried to focus on the positives. Nancy and John were generally polite and tried to be helpful in their own way. We had a few more family dinners, and I made an effort to include them in our daily routines. One morning, I decided to take a break from the house and go for a walk. I needed some fresh air and a bit of time to myself. As I walked around the neighborhood, I thought about how much our lives had changed in just a few days. When I got back home, Nancy was in the kitchen, making coffee. "Morning, Hannah. How was your walk?" "It was nice, thanks," I replied, feeling a bit more refreshed. She smiled. "Good. I'm thinking of baking some cookies later. Would you like some?" I appreciated the gesture. "Sure, that sounds great, Nancy." As I went about my day, I reminded myself that this was just a temporary situation. I could handle a few weeks of extra company and clutter. It wasn't ideal, but it was manageable. Things took a turn after a few days of my in-laws moving in. It started slowly, but soon became clear that Nancy and John were taking over our house. It began one morning when I was making breakfast. Nancy walked into the kitchen and wrinkled her nose at the spread. "Hannah, what's this? Oatmeal again? We need some real food. Bacon and eggs would be nice." I clenched my jaw, but nodded. "Fine, I'll make bacon and eggs tomorrow." The next day, I found Nancy in the living room, moving my favorite chair. "This recliner needs a better spot. Don't you think, Hannah?" I tried to keep my cool. "Nancy, please ask before moving my furniture." She just shrugged. "It's for the best, trust me." John wasn't any better. He'd park himself in front of the TV all day, snacking and leaving crumbs everywhere. I confronted him one evening. "John, can you at least use a plate? The living room's a mess." He grunted without looking away from the screen. Yeah, sure, whatever. I felt like I was losing control of my own home. Every day, Nancy would find something new to criticize or change. One afternoon, I caught her rearranging the kitchen cabinets. "Nancy, what are you doing?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Oh, just organizing things better. Your system is a bit chaotic." It was getting harder to keep my patience. I talked to Tom about it that evening. "Tom, your parents are taking over. They're changing everything and making a mess." He sighed, looking annoyed. "Hannah, they're just trying to help. Can't you just let it go?" I couldn't believe his attitude. It was like he didn't care about how I felt. I decided to try and manage things on my own, hoping they'd eventually leave as promised. The next morning, Nancy decided to critique my cleaning. "Hannah, this house is dusty. Can't you do a better job?" I bit back my frustration. "I clean every day, Nancy. Maybe you could help out?" "Help out? I'm a guest here, remember?" I walked away before I said something I'd regret. I was feeling more like a maid than a hostess. John was no help either. He'd leave dirty dishes everywhere, expecting me to clean up after him. One day, I found Nancy going through my closet. "What are you doing in here?" She didn't even look guilty. "Just seeing if you have something I can borrow. We're about the same size." "Nancy, you can't just go through my things. Ask first." She huffed and walked out, muttering under her breath. I felt like I was losing my mind. Tom's lack of support made it even worse. Every time I brought up an issue, he'd brush it off. The next morning, Nancy announced she was going to redecorate the guest bedroom. "I think this room needs a new look. I'll bring in some new curtains and a bedspread." I stared at her, incredulous. "Nancy, this is my house. You can't just change everything without asking. We're just trying to make it more comfortable, Hannah. You should be grateful." I felt a wave of anger and frustration, but decided to walk away. I needed to find a way to regain control of my home and my life. I hoped Tom would eventually see reason, but I wasn't holding my breath. Things had gone from bad to worse. Nancy, my mother-in-law, started taking my bank card without even asking. One day, I noticed charges on my account that I didn't make. It was Nancy, buying things for herself. I confronted her about it. "Nancy, you took my card without asking. You can't do that." She looked at me, unbothered. "Hannah, we needed a few things. What's the big deal?" "It's my card, Nancy. You need to ask first." She shrugged and walked away, leaving me fuming. I decided to talk to Tom about it, hoping he'd back me up. "Tom, your mom's been using my bank card without asking. This has to stop," I told him that evening. He barely looked up from his phone. "Hannah, it's just some groceries and stuff. She can use it, we live off my income anyway." I walked away, feeling defeated. It was clear Tom wasn't going to support me. I felt like I was losing control of my own finances, let alone my house. A month passed, and there was no sign of Nancy and John leaving. Every day felt like a struggle to maintain some sense of normalcy. They were constantly going through my things, rearranging the house, and demanding specific meals. One evening, during dinner, I decided to bring up the topic. "Nancy, John, when do you think you'll be heading back to your apartment?" They both laughed, and I looked at them, confused. Tom finally spoke up. "Hannah, they're staying here indefinitely. I don't have the money to rent them a separate place right now." I stared at him in disbelief. "What? Indefinitely? Tom, we didn't agree on this. They're my parents, Hannah. They need a place to stay." I felt a wave of depression wash over me. This wasn't what I signed up for. Now I was stuck serving my in-laws, who acted like they owned the place. The kitchen was another battleground. Nancy had specific demands for meals and wasn't shy about making them known. "Hannah, I want roast beef for dinner tonight. Make sure it's done right," she instructed one morning. I bit my tongue, trying to stay calm. I'll see what I can do, Nancy. Every day felt like a struggle to keep my sanity. Tom was no help, constantly siding with his parents. I felt trapped in my own home, forced to cater to people who treated me like a servant. One evening, I decided I'd had enough. I needed to confront Tom and make him understand how miserable I was. Tom, this can't go on. Your parents are treating me like a servant, and it needs to stop, I said, my voice trembling with frustration. He shook his head. You're overreacting. Just deal with it. I felt tears of frustration welling up, but held them back. It was clear Tom wasn't going to change his stance. I knew I had to find a way to stand up for myself and take back control of my life. As the days went on, I tried to set firmer boundaries with Nancy and John, but it felt like a losing battle. They continued to overstep, and Tom continued to defend them. So, one day I went for a run to clear my head and ended up taking a nasty fall. I broke my leg and some good Samaritans called an ambulance for me. After a long day at the hospital, I finally got back home in a taxi, exhausted and in pain. When I hobbled through the door on crutches, Nancy and John were sitting in the living room, watching TV. Tom was there too, looking annoyed. Nancy glanced up and said, "Where's dinner, Hannah? We had to order pizza." I pointed to my leg, still throbbing with pain. I broke my leg. I couldn't cook. Tom chimed in, clearly irritated. "Hannah, stop pretending. You can still cook." Pretending? I was at the hospital all day, Tom. I shouted, feeling the frustration boiling over. "No need to get dramatic," Nancy said, turning back to the TV. I was forced to cook dinner on crutches the next day. It was a struggle, but I managed to get something on the table. Nancy and John still found reasons to complain. A few days later, we were having dinner when Nancy dropped another bombshell. "We've invited our relatives over for Thanksgiving. Since you're laid up with that leg, you should move out for a couple of weeks. They'll need the space." I stared at her in disbelief. "You want me to leave my own house?" John nodded. "It's just for a couple of weeks, Hannah. You'll be in the way with that leg." Tom just sat there, not saying a word. I looked at him, hoping for some support, but he avoided my gaze. "You can't be serious," I said, feeling my patience snap. "This is my house. I'm not going anywhere." Nancy crossed her arms, looking defiant. "We've already told them they can stay here." I felt a surge of anger. "You had no right to do that. This is my home, not yours." Tom finally spoke up. "Hannah, just do it. It's only temporary." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You expect me to leave my house so your relatives can stay here? With my broken leg?" "You're being difficult, Hannah," Nancy said, her voice cold. I felt my blood boil, but then a strange calm washed over me. I smiled, feeling a surge of strength. "No, Nancy. You get out of my house." Tom exploded. "Hannah, you're a freeloader. You live off my money. If you don't do what my parents say, I'll divorce you." I kept my smile, feeling a strange sense of relief. "Fine, Tom. I agree to the divorce." He looked shocked, clearly not expecting that. "You'll regret this, Hannah." I stood up, steadying myself on my crutches. "No, Tom. I'm done with all of you. Pack your things and get out." Tom stormed out of the room, fuming. He called the movers right then and there, and within a few hours, they were loading up the truck with their stuff. I watched them, feeling a mixture of relief and anger. I couldn't believe it had come to this, but I knew it was the right thing to do. They drove away, leaving me standing in the doorway, my leg throbbing but my heart feeling lighter. The next morning, I wasted no time. I called a locksmith and had the locks changed on the house. I wanted no chance of them coming back. With the new locks in place, I started cleaning the house, hobbling around on my crutches. My leg was healing slowly, but I was determined to get rid of every reminder of Tom and his parents. I gathered their leftover belongings, packed them into boxes, and put them by the door for donation. It was hard work, and I had to take frequent breaks, but each time I sat down, I felt a bit more at peace. I went through each room, removing anything that reminded me of them. I wanted my house to feel like mine again, free from the chaos they had brought into my life. Just when I thought I'd finally have some peace, something unbelievable happened. I was getting ready to spend Thanksgiving alone, looking forward to a quiet day. I had just put a pie in the oven when there was a loud knock on the door. I hobbled over to the door, still a bit sore from my leg injury. When I opened it, I couldn't believe my eyes. There stood Tom, Nancy, and a bunch of their relatives, all looking way too cheerful. "Happy Thanksgiving, Hannah," Tom said with a big grin. I stared at them, stunned. "What are you doing here?" Nancy waved a key at me, looking annoyed. "We couldn't get in." "Why did you change the locks?" I took a deep breath, feeling my anger rise. "Because you're not welcome here anymore." "I changed the locks, because you're strangers to me now." Tom laughed, clearly not taking me seriously. "Come on, Hannah. I earn the money here. You can't just kick us out." I couldn't help but laugh too, but it was a bitter laugh. "Tom, I've got savings from my grandfather. I don't need your money. I can take care of myself." Nancy's eyes lit up when she heard about the money. "Oh, well, we came to make peace, Hannah. We should all live together as a family." I shook my head, feeling a strange calm. "No, Nancy. I don't consider you my family anymore." Tom looked shocked, still not believing I was serious. "You're really going to do this, Hannah?" I nodded and pulled out the divorce papers I had prepared. "Yes, Tom. Here are the divorce papers. I'm done." Nancy tried to push past me. "Hannah, let's talk about this inside." I stepped in front of her, blocking the doorway. "No, you're not coming in. If you don't leave, I'll call the police." They all stared at me, completely stunned. Tom tried one last time. "Hannah, don't do this. Let's talk calmly." I shook my head. "No, Tom. I'm finally doing what's right for me. Now leave." They muttered and scowled, but they finally turned and left, throwing insults over their shoulders, calling me cruel and arrogant. I watched them go, feeling a huge weight lift off my shoulders. I closed the door and locked it, leaning against it for a moment, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. It was over. I had stood up for myself and taken control of my life. As the days passed, I focused on healing and rebuilding my home. I got rid of everything that reminded me of Tom and his family, creating a space that was truly mine. It wasn't easy, but every step I took made me feel stronger and more in control. I reconnected with friends, started new hobbies, and slowly built a new routine that made me happy. I was no longer living in fear or frustration. I had my peace, my home, and my life back. Growing up, our house was like a fortress of strict rules and sharp expectations. I'm Emily, by the way. My dad, Richard, co-owned a big tech company and believed in running our family like a corporate boardroom. My mom, Helen, stayed at home, her life revolving around maintaining the perfect household and making sure me and my sister, Anna, stayed on track, her version of track. Anna, 3 years my senior, was the star child. She aced everything without even trying. Or so it seemed to me, always stumbling in her shadow. Our parents, especially Dad, made it clear they had high hopes for us. Hopes that pretty much mapped out our entire lives: top grades, elite college, prestigious careers. This particular evening was like any replay of a tired old sitcom. Dinner was tense. The clinking of cutlery on fine china always seemed louder when the air was thick with expectation. Dad's eyes darted from Anna to me, like he was mentally tallying points on some parental scoreboard. "So, Anna, your economics teacher called today. She's impressed with your latest project. Said it was college-level work," Dad announced, his voice tinged with pride. Anna smiled, the perfect daughter glow up on full display. "Thanks, Dad. I really pushed myself with this one." His gaze swung to me. And Emily? How are your grades? Still struggling with calculus, I hear. The food in my mouth turned to sawdust. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Anna's eyes flickered my way, a glimmer of sympathy before she quickly masked it. Math isn't my thing, Dad. You know I'm more into. Math is everyone's thing if they put in the effort, he cut me off. His tone wasn't mean, just matter of fact, as if he was discussing the weather or a stock market trend. Mom chimed in, her voice softer but no less insistent. Your father's right, Emily. You can't just give up because something doesn't come easily. Look at Anna. She works hard. Why can't you be more like her? I bristled. I do work hard. Just not at things that matter to you. Dad's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means I have other interests. Like art. He scoffed, shaking his head. Art is a hobby, Emily. It won't pay your bills or build a future. You need to be realistic. I pushed my chair back, the legs screeching against the tile floor. Excuse me, I need some air. As I left, Dad's voice followed me. We're only saying this for your own good, Emily. Outside, the cool evening breeze was a small relief from the stifling dining room. Their expectations were like chains, heavy and cold, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't seem to break free. Not like Anna, who wore those expectations like a crown, always poised, always perfect. But that night, under the starry sky, I made a silent vow. One day, I'd find a place where I wasn't just Anna's lesser shadow. A place where I could be me, whatever that meant, without apology or comparison. In our house, everything was a competition, especially for my sister Anna and me. My dad had this belief that pitting us against each other was the way to breed success. He'd say stuff like, competition sharpens the mind. But all it did for me was grind my confidence into dust. I mean, imagine screwing up a math problem and then going to school with a rumbling stomach the next day, because of it. That was my reality. Anna always came out on top. Whether it was math, science, or any school subject, she nailed it. Because of that, she was the golden child, the one who wore new clothes and had lunch packed with more than just leftovers. On the other hand, I was the one in faded jeans, trying to get by on scraps. Dad made sure of it. You need to push harder, Emily, he'd say at the dinner table, barely looking up from his plate as he compared our report cards. Look at your sister. She's setting the bar. Meet it or go hungry. The unfairness of it all could choke you. My mom, Helen, always backed him up too. Your father's right, she'd add, in that quiet voice of hers that somehow sliced deeper than any shout. We only want what's best for you. But I had a different idea of what was best for me. My room was my refuge, a small space crammed with paints, brushes, and canvases. I wasn't any good with numbers or business strategies, but give me a brush, and I could make magic. One late afternoon, after another crushing round of comparisons where I came up lacking, I escaped to my room, slamming the door behind me. I needed to drown everything out, the disappointment in Dad's eyes, Mom's sighs, Anna's awkward attempts to make me feel better. Painting was my escape, my secret world. I was mixing some blues and greens, trying to capture the storm inside me on the canvas, when Anna knocked softly. Emily, can I come in? I didn't have it in me to send her away, so I just grunted. Yeah, whatever. She stepped in, hovering by the door. Her eyes roamed over my makeshift studio, lingering on the unfinished canvas. That looks amazing, Em. It's just a storm, I muttered, focusing on blending the colors, letting the brush strokes express my frustration. No, I mean it. You really have something here. Why don't you show them? I scoffed, a harsh laugh escaping me. Yeah, right. Look, Dad, forget about my crappy grades and check out this painting I made. That'll really impress him. Anna bit her lip, looking like she wanted to argue, but instead, she shifted the topic. Just, don't let him stop you, okay? You're good. Really good. The last year of school crushed me under its weight. Anna had sailed into the Faculty of Management at the prestigious university everyone expected us both to attend. Me? I was barely scraping by, my heart not in the endless formulas and business strategies that piled up on my desk. The day the college acceptance letters were due, the atmosphere at home was electric with tension. I already knew what the letter would say, or rather, what it wouldn't. Dragging myself downstairs, I found both my parents in the living room, the dreaded letter lying like a verdict on the coffee table. Mom's face was stormy as she waved the letter at me. Care to explain this? I took a deep breath, bracing for the explosion. I didn't get in. And you're not even upset? Mom accused. Her voice was sharp, like she could cut me open and find the answers she wanted. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? Your sister got in with flying colors, and here you are, failing. I'm not Anna. I shot back, my patience fraying. That's the problem. You never try hard enough. You're going to end up a stupid beggar. Her words stung, but not as much as they used to. I was too tired, too worn down from fighting a battle I never chose. I don't want to be a businesswoman, I said quietly, the truth finally spilling out. I want to be an artist. The room went deadly quiet. Dad, who had been silently brooding by the window, turned sharply. His voice was cold and furious. You want to what? Throw your life away? It's my life, I retorted, feeling a spark of defiance. Not yours. I've never wanted this. I've never wanted any of this. You ungrateful child, Dad hissed, his face red with anger. If you think you can choose such a worthless path, you can get out. Get out and don't come back. His words hung heavy in the air. I looked from him to Mom, who was shaking her head, tears of frustration, or was it disappointment, in her eyes. Fine, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'll leave. I don't need this. I don't need any of you. As I stormed upstairs, my heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear my parents arguing in the background. I shoved my clothes, my sketchbooks, a few cherished art supplies into a bag. With each item, I felt a chain breaking, a piece of the old, suffocating life falling away. When I walked out the door, suitcase in hand, Dad's final words were a cold goodbye. You're no daughter of mine anymore. I stepped out into the unknown, the evening air cool and slightly biting against my face. It was scary, and for a moment, I didn't know what to do or where to go. But as I walked down the street, the weight of years of expectations lifted off my shoulders, and I realized I was free. The only place I thought of going was Grandma's. She had always been the soft counter to Dad's strict rules, a quiet rebel who nurtured my love for painting, despite his disapproval. So, with my world turned upside down, I found myself dragging my suitcase up her garden path, the familiar scent of her rose bushes somehow reassuring. Knocking on her door, my heart was thumping wildly, half out of fear, half out of relief. When she opened the door and saw me standing there, her expression shifted from surprise to concern in a heartbeat. Emily, what in the world? She didn't finish her sentence, just pulled me into a warm hug that smelled like vanilla and fabric softener. I left home, Grandma, I managed to say, my voice muffled against her shoulder. Come in, she ushered, leading me into the cozy kitchen where a kettle was already whistling on the stove. Once we were seated at her table, a cup of tea in front of each of us, I told her everything. How Dad had disowned me, how Mom just stood there, how I couldn't bear to live under their roof a moment longer. Grandma listened, her eyes softening with each word I spoke. You did what you had to do, dear, she said once I'd finished. And you'll always have a home here with me. Relief washed over me, the tension I'd been carrying dissipating slightly. Thank you, Grandma. I don't know what I would do without you. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Now, tell me about your plans. I know you, Emily. You must have a plan. Taking a deep breath, I shared my secret hope with her. I applied to the Institute of Arts. On the internet, quietly. I didn't tell Mom and Dad. Grandma's face broke into a wide smile. That's wonderful. Following your heart, that's my girl. The conversation shifted to lighter topics for a while, allowing me to breathe easier and feel momentarily carefree. But later that evening, as we were cleaning up after a dinner of her homemade lasagna, my phone buzzed with an email notification. I checked it, not expecting much. "It's from the Institute of Arts," I said, a knot forming in my stomach. Grandma dried her hands quickly and came over to stand beside me. "Well, open it, dear," she urged, her voice tinged with excitement. With a shaky hand, I tapped on the screen and read the contents of the email, my eyes widening with each word. "I got in, Grandma. I got in, and they're offering me a scholarship. Full tuition covered." "Oh, Emily!" Grandma exclaimed, her eyes brimming with tears as she pulled me into another hug. "I knew it. I always knew you had something special. This is just the beginning for you." We spent the rest of the evening talking about the future, about art and dreams, and making a new life. It felt like for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Grandma's faith in me bolstered my own, and I felt ready to take on this new challenge. A few days later, Grandma accompanied me to the institute to finalize my registration. Walking through the halls filled with vibrant art and buzzing with creative energy, I felt a sense of belonging that had eluded me for years. "You're going to do great things, my dear," Grandma whispered as we left the administration office, my enrollment confirmed. Living on campus was a world away from everything I'd known. For the first time, I was not just studying what I loved, I was immersed in it. The transition wasn't easy, though. Drawing had been something I sneaked around doing back home because my parents had made it clear they didn't see a future in it for me. But here, at the Institute of Arts, it was my life. My first year was tough. The freedom to create was exhilarating, but also daunting. I struggled initially, battling the ingrained fear of my parents' disapproval and the pressure to prove I could make it on my own. Yet, with every sketch and painting, I grew more confident. By the end of the year, not only had I found my footing, but I had also emerged as one of the top students in my class. Professors praised my unique style, and I started to believe maybe I did have something special. As my skills developed, so did recognition. The school offered a few of us, the so-called emerging talents, a chance to showcase our work at a personal exhibition. I jumped at the opportunity. Preparing for the exhibition was intense. Every piece had to say something, to stand out. I poured my heart into each painting, hoping they were good enough to be noticed. The night of the exhibition was surreal. The gallery was buzzing with people, music softly playing in the background, lights casting a perfect glow on the paintings. I stood nervously by my work, watching as people walked by, stopping to look, to discuss. My grandmother, who had come to see the exhibition, stood beside me, her eyes wet with pride. "You've done well, Emily," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "I'm so proud of you." That night, something incredible happened. A local TV crew, who had come to cover the exhibition, featured my work. Suddenly, I wasn't just a student, I was an artist being talked about. The segment aired, and the next thing I knew, I was being invited to talk about my art on various shows. My paintings started circulating on the internet, gaining popularity. It was all so fast, so big. I felt like I was dreaming. The real pinch me moment came when an animation studio contacted me. They wanted to use my designs for a series. Next thing, those sketches and characters I created in the solitude of my studio were moving, living on screens. They even started a comic book series based on them. And yeah, they paid me, which felt weird but incredible. I remember sitting in my dorm, watching the first episode of the animated series, thinking about how far I'd come. From hiding my sketches from my parents, to seeing my creations come to life on TV, it was mind-blowing. I was in my studio on campus, streaks of paint on my hands, and a blank canvas waiting, when my phone rang. It was Anna. I hesitated for a moment, not sure what to expect. We hadn't talked much since I left home. "Emily? It's Anna," she said, her voice uncertain. "I saw you on TV last night. You were amazing." Thanks, I replied, taken aback by her call and her compliment. I appreciate it, Anna. How's school going for you? It's fine, she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. Actually, that's partly why I called. I've been thinking a lot about what I'm doing. I'm not sure I'm as cut out for the business world as Dad thinks. Watching you follow your passion made me wonder if I'm just going along with what's expected of me, not what I want. This was new. Anna, the perfect student, doubting her path? It's never too late to change your course, you know. If you're not happy, maybe it's time to think about what you really want, I said, more as a friend than as her estranged sister. Yeah, right, she laughed softly. Maybe I need a bit of your courage. We can share some of mine. I've got plenty to go around now, I joked, easing the tension. A few weeks later, Anna came to visit me. She toured my studio and my latest works, her interest genuine. It was strange but comforting to have her in my space, seeing the part of my life that had caused so much distance between us. You really are talented, Emily, Anna said as she looked around at the paintings, the sketches, and the splashes of color everywhere. It's my world, I told her, feeling a surge of pride. Wanna try? She hesitated, then smiled. Why not? Handing her a brush felt symbolic, like I was welcoming her into my life in a way we hadn't shared since we were kids. As Anna and I laughed over her crooked paint strokes, I realized that this recognition was all I had really wanted from the start. As our laughter died down, Anna's expression turned serious. You know, when Mom and Dad found out about your TV spot and the shows, they were furious. Dad said you're defaming the family name with your doodles. They really don't get it, Em. The words stung, but I wasn't surprised. Let them think what they want, I said, shrugging. I'm not living for them anymore, Anna. I'm living for me. And for the art. Yeah. Anna nodded, looking around at all the colors and shapes that filled my world now. You've built something beautiful here, Em. Don't ever let them tell you otherwise. Hearing that from Anna, knowing that she saw the value in what I was doing despite our parents' disapproval, meant everything. It solidified my resolve to keep going, no matter what they said or did. I was an artist, and that was something no one could take away from me. It had been 6 months of peace and creativity when it all came crashing down during one of my exhibitions. I was showcasing some of my latest work, which had drawn a decent crowd, buzzing with chatter and admiration. That's when my parents stormed in, their faces thunderous. My father, his face red with anger, scanned the room until his eyes landed on me. Without hesitation, he marched over, my mother trailing behind him, her eyes darting nervously around the room. The moment he reached me, he erupted. This is what you left your family for? These ridiculous paintings? He gestured wildly at my art hanging on the walls. You're shaming us, Emily. You think this is a real job? Artists are just drug addicts pretending to be profound. I was stunned, words failing me as his voice echoed off the gallery walls. Before I could gather my thoughts, he lunged at one of my paintings, his hands clawing at the canvas. I gasped, stepping forward, but the gallery organizer was quicker. He called security immediately. Sir, you need to leave. Now. The organizer demanded, as 2 guards quickly intervened, pulling my father away from the damaged artwork. The aftermath was a blur of apologies from me to the guests and the gallery owner, assurances that this was an isolated incident. But the damage was done. The evening was ruined, and so was my mood. Over the next few days, my phone was bombarded with texts from both of my parents. Each message was a dagger, full of accusations and predictions of doom. You'll come crawling back once you realize the real world isn't kind to dreamers, one read. You think you're successful? This is just a phase, said another. I tried to ignore them, but each beep of my phone brought a fresh wave of anxiety. It wasn't until I received an email notification about the animated series based on my artwork that I found a sliver of vindication. The series had just crossed another 1 million views, and the comments were overwhelmingly positive, praising the creativity and unique style. Fueled by a mix of anger and pride, I copied the link to the YouTube page and sent it to my parents with a simple message. See for yourself. After that, the messages stopped. Their silence was louder than all their criticisms combined. Maybe, just maybe, they had watched the videos and read the comments. Perhaps they finally understood that my art was something real and valued by others, even if they couldn't see it themselves. 2 years had flown by when my sister Anna called me with news that shook our family to its core. Dad had lost his business due to a betrayal by a foreign partner, and they were financially ruined. They had to sell the house and move into a small apartment. What's more, Anna decided to leave the prestigious university she never truly loved and was planning to transfer to another college to study landscape design, something she was genuinely passionate about. During the holiday season, I visited Grandma's house, where Anna was now staying. She was beaming with genuine happiness, a stark contrast to the stressed sister I remembered. "I've got a scholarship, Emily," she told me as soon as I walked in. "I'm finally studying what I want, and I'll be living here with Grandma." "That's amazing, Anna. I'm so proud of you," I replied, embracing her tightly. Grandma joined in, hugging us both. "You girls are so talented," she said, her eyes twinkling with pride and love. Over the next 3 years, my career as an artist flourished. My paintings were featured in top galleries across the country, and I managed to carve out a name for myself in the competitive art world. My work sold for substantial amounts, allowing me to live comfortably and continue pursuing my passion. However, the past has a way of catching up. One day, as I was setting up a new series of paintings in my studio, my parents walked in. The sight of them was startling. Dad looked frail and worn, a shadow of his former self, and Mom was dressed far more modestly than I had ever seen. "Emily, we need to talk," Dad began, his voice weak but urgent. I nodded, leading them to a small sitting area in the corner of my studio. "What's going on?" I asked, although the tight knot in my stomach already had an inkling. "We're in a bad place, Emily," Mom started, her voice trembling. "We've lost everything, and we need your help." Dad coughed slightly before adding, "You've done well for yourself, which we knew you would, despite what we said. We were hoping you could lend us some money. Help us get back on our feet." The request hung heavily in the air, thick with irony and desperation. I took a deep breath, the memories of their dismissal and harsh words echoing in my mind. "You both disowned me when I chose this path. You said I would fail and wished me nothing but the worst," I reminded them softly, yet firmly. "Yes, but we're still your family," Dad insisted, looking at me with eyes that were pleading yet prideful. "I built this life on my own, without any help from you after you turned your backs on me. You made it clear then that you didn't want anything to do with me or my career," I continued, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Mom looked down, tears starting to form in her eyes, while Dad simply stared, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry, but I won't be giving you any money," I concluded, the finality in my voice mirroring the closure I felt in my heart. They stood, the air thick with tension and unspoken words. "We hope you reconsider, Emily," Mom said softly as they turned to leave. Watching them walk away, I felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. It was a difficult decision, but necessary to protect the life and boundaries I had fought so hard to establish. My name's Julie. Life threw me a curveball when I was just 9. Dad had been sick for a while, but I didn't really get what was happening until he was gone for good. One day he was there, the next day just an empty space at the dinner table. Mom didn't take long to fill that space. Within a few months, she brought home Frank. I guess loneliness hits hard and fast. Frank moved in like he owned the place, and it was clear he wasn't keen on having me around. "Julie, this is Frank. Frank, this is my daughter, Julie," Mom introduced us the day he moved in. His look was cold, like he'd rather be anywhere else, but here looking at me. "Hi," I managed, a bit shy, but trying to be polite. Frank just nodded, didn't even smile. He turned to Mom. "Sarah, can we talk about the living arrangements?" I remember feeling a chill as they walked away, his hand on her shoulder. It wasn't long before I started feeling like an outsider. Frank had rules for everything, and he was always on my case. Don't leave your stuff in the living room, eat faster, or too much noise. It was relentless. Mom did nothing. She just nodded along with whatever Frank said, her eyes empty or maybe just tired. One evening, things boiled over at dinner. I had accidentally knocked over a glass of water, and it spilled towards Frank. "Clumsy kid, can't you do anything right?" Frank snapped, jumping up as the water splashed his pants. "Sorry, Frank. It was just an accident," I stammered, feeling my face heat up. "Sorry doesn't clean up messes, Julie. Be more careful," he scolded, his voice raised more than necessary. Mom just sat there, dabbing her mouth with a napkin, silent. I looked at her, hoping she'd say something, anything in my defense. But nothing came. After dinner, I heard them arguing in their room. Frank's voice was loud and harsh. "Sarah, that kid of yours needs to shape up. I'm not gonna live in chaos just because you're used to it." Mom's reply was soft, but I caught bits of it. "Frank, please. She's just a child. She's still adjusting." "Adjusting? It's been months. I'm telling you, if things don't change." I didn't hear the rest, but I didn't need to. The message was clear. Frank wanted me out of the way, and Mom wasn't fighting too hard against the idea. The next few months were just as tough. Frank's complaints were a daily soundtrack, and Mom's silence grew heavier. I was walking on eggshells, trying not to make a sound, disappear if I could. But you can't disappear in your own home, can you? Even a 9-year-old knows that much. Life at home got trickier when Mom told us she was expecting. Frank already had his hands full just tolerating me, and the news didn't exactly make him jump for joy. He was silent for a long minute before he spoke, and when he did, his words were clipped and cold. "Well, that's just great, Sarah. Just what we needed," he said, his tone dripping with something that sounded a lot like sarcasm. Mom just smiled, a bit too weakly. "It's a blessing, Frank. You'll see. A fresh start for us." I remember feeling a mix of excitement and dread. A little brother or sister seemed like a dream, someone new to connect with, but with Frank's mood swings, I wasn't so sure. Months flew by, and the baby finally arrived. It was a girl, and they named her Anna. I was thrilled. She was tiny, and when I first saw her, all wrapped up in her pink blanket, my heart melted. I thought having Anna around might make things better, even make Frank soften up a bit. Holding Anna felt magical. She was so small, her tiny fingers grasping at nothing. "Hey there, Anna. I'm your big sister, Julie. I'm gonna take good care of you," I whispered, promising silently to be there for her, no matter what. But the magic didn't last. Bringing Anna home changed the dynamics again. Frank was fussier than ever, especially about money. One night, about a week after Anna came home, I overheard him talking to Mom in the kitchen. His voice was harsh, louder than it needed to be. "More expenses, Sarah. Diapers, formula, God knows what else. And what about Julie? She's not even mine, and I'm footing the bill for her too?" Mom's voice was a quiet murmur. "Frank, please, she's just a child. We can manage. Things will settle down." "It's not just about managing, Sarah. It's about priorities. We need to think about our family now. Our real family." I knew what that meant. I wasn't real family. The sting of those words hit me hard. I slid down the wall, by my door, hugging my knees, trying not to cry. The final straw came when Frank sat us down in the living room one evening, his face serious, his eyes avoiding mine. "Sarah, we need to think about the future. Julie's getting older, and expenses are piling up. Maybe it's time she went to live with her Aunt Claire." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "Sent away? Just like that?" Mom finally spoke, looking at me, her eyes sad. "Julie, honey, it might not be so bad. Aunt Claire has a nice house, and you'll be well taken care of. But Mom, I don't want to go. I want to stay here with you and Anna. The room went silent. Frank's next words were cold and final. It's decided then. I'll call Claire in the morning. Moving in with Aunt Claire was like stepping into a different world. Her house was big, clean, and always silent. Too silent for comfort. The first day I arrived, she laid down her laws like we were setting terms for a peace treaty after a long war. You'll follow my rules under my roof, Julie. No nonsense, no mess, no backtalk, she declared as she led me through the hall to what would be my room. The room was plain, with bare walls and a single bed against the corner. It felt nothing like home. I nodded, too tired and too upset to argue. Homework right after school, chores before dinner, and lights out by 9. I won't tolerate any laziness or sloppiness, you hear? Aunt Claire continued, her voice firm. Yes, Aunt Claire, I responded, my voice a whisper. Speak up when you're spoken to. Let's have no mumbling here, she snapped. I quickly corrected my tone. Yes, Aunt Claire, I understand. The days that followed blended into each other, each as strict and unforgiving as the last. Aunt Claire was tough, tougher than anyone I'd ever known. She had a way of making simple conversations feel like interrogations. Homework was a battlefield too. If I got a B instead of an A, Aunt Claire had words that stung sharper than any I'd heard before. You can do better than this. Your laziness won't fly here, she'd scold, even though I'd spent hours poring over books. The worst was how she reminded me of my mom's decision to send me away. If I dared to talk back or ask for less criticism, she'd retort sharply, no wonder your mom sent you here. You need discipline you obviously weren't getting. Those words hurt. They always did. They made me feel unwanted, unloved, like I was just another problem Mom had to solve by shipping me off. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. I learned to keep my head down, do as told, and speak only when necessary. Aunt Claire had no patience for tears or complaints, and I had no energy left to fight. It's for your own good, she'd often say after a particularly harsh scolding, as if the sting of her words was supposed to mold me into someone better. I wasn't sure who that better person was supposed to be. All I knew was I was getting really good at being alone, at being quiet, at not being a problem. Because in Aunt Claire's house, not being a problem was the best thing you could be. Living with Aunt Claire was suffocating, and I found myself missing my mom more each day, even though I knew she had let me go without much of a fight. One afternoon, the longing got too much. Aunt Claire was out, probably at her bridge club, and I knew I had a couple of hours at least. Her phone was always left on the kitchen counter, charging next to the fruit bowl. It seemed like my only link back to my old life. I hesitated for a minute before I picked it up. Dialing my mom's number was muscle memory. I hadn't forgotten it, maybe I never would. My heart was racing as I heard the phone ring. Once, twice, then her voice. Hello? Mom? It's me, Julie. There was a pause, a breath maybe, then, Julie, why are you calling? I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I just wanted to hear your voice. Another pause, longer this time. Then cold, hard, you shouldn't have called. But Mom. Julie, listen to me. You need to stop this. I can't have you calling me. But why? I miss you, Mom. I miss home. When can I come back? Her voice was flat, emotionless as if she was discussing the weather. You can't. That's done. Don't call here anymore. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, please. Just don't, Julie. There's nothing here for you. Goodbye. She hung up, and the line went dead. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. I felt my hands shake as I put the phone back on the charger. The finality in her voice broke something in me. She didn't want me. She really didn't want me anymore. Tears blurred my vision as I stumbled to my room. I closed the door softly, not wanting to make any noise that might hint at my rebellion. I sat on the floor, my back against my bed, and let myself cry. The room felt smaller than ever, a box that was slowly closing in on me. About an hour later, I heard the front door open and close. Aunt Claire's voice called out, "Julie? You better have finished your chores." "Yes, Aunt Claire," I called back, wiping my eyes quickly with the back of my hand. I didn't want her to see any signs of weakness. Weakness was not tolerated here. I went to the kitchen to help with dinner as if nothing had happened, but inside, I was different. I felt emptier, more alone. Mom's voice, those final words, played over and over in my head. That night, Aunt Claire discovered the call log on her phone. Her face twisted into a scowl as she stormed into my room, her voice a harsh whisper that cut through the quiet. "So, you took my phone to call your mother? Thought you'd go behind my back?" I froze, the blood draining from my face. I just wanted to hear her voice. Aunt Claire laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "And what did that get you, huh? She doesn't want you, Julie. Even you can't deny it now." Her words were like ice, and I felt them chill me to the bone. She grabbed my arm, her grip tight and painful. "No more phone. No more pity parties. You're here because she doesn't want you. Remember that." The punishment was severe. More chores, stricter rules, and the cold shoulder from Aunt Claire, who made sure every day thereafter that I felt just how unwanted I was. Aunt Claire's house had become a prison, each day dragging, heavier than the last. It was clear I was nothing but a burden to her, a nuisance she tolerated only because she had to. But even that thin thread of obligation snapped one chilly morning a year into my stay. "You're packing your bags today, Julie," Aunt Claire announced over breakfast, her voice stern and final. I stared at her, spoon halfway to my mouth. "What? Why?" "Your mother stopped sending money." "No money, no reason to keep you here," she replied bluntly, sipping her coffee as if we were discussing something as trivial as the weather. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. "So, what happens to me now?" She shrugged, a cold, dismissive gesture. "Not my problem. You can go live with your grandmother. If she won't take you, then it's the orphanage." The thought of going to an orphanage terrified me, but the mention of Grandma sparked a tiny flicker of hope. I hadn't seen her since I was little, barely remembered her, but surely she wouldn't turn me away. Packing my bags felt surreal, like I was stripping away layers of my life at Aunt Claire's, each item a reminder of the year I'd lost. Aunt Claire drove me to Grandma's, the car ride silent except for the hum of the engine. We arrived at a modest house, smaller and cozier than Aunt Claire's imposing place. Grandma was waiting at the door, her expression unreadable. "This is Julie, your granddaughter," Aunt Claire said, not bothering with niceties. "I can't keep her anymore. Sarah stopped paying." Grandma looked me over, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "I see. Come in, Julie." Aunt Claire didn't linger. With a brief nod, she left, her duty discarded as easily as she'd disposed of me. Inside, Grandma's house was warm, filled with the scent of cinnamon and something sweet baking. It felt welcoming, a stark contrast to Aunt Claire's sterile environment. "You'll be staying in the guest room. I suppose we'll need to sort out some more permanent arrangements," Grandma said, leading me down the hall. The guest room was small, with a window overlooking the garden. It felt safe, a word I hadn't associated with a place in a long time. "Thank you, Grandma," I said, my voice low, still unsure of my welcome. She nodded. "We're family, Julie. You belong here more than anywhere else." Over the next few weeks, I adjusted to life with Grandma. It was different. She was strict, but there was a kindness to her rules, a gentleness in her reprimands. "You need to do your chores, Julie. Everyone contributes here," she would remind me, but her tone was patient, not harsh. "Yes, Grandma," I would respond, grateful for her fair approach. Living with Grandma, I began to heal. I found solace in the quiet routine of our days, the peaceful nights, and the steady rhythm of life that was so different from the chaos with Aunt Claire. The months rolled by, and on my 16th birthday, Grandma made a decision that would seal our bond forever. Over breakfast, she slid an envelope across the table to me. "Take a look at this, Julie," she said, her voice carrying a mix of seriousness and warmth. I opened the envelope, pulling out some official-looking papers. "What's this?" "It's adoption papers, Julie. I want to adopt you. Make things official, so no one can ever make you feel unwanted again," she explained, watching me closely for my reaction. I felt a lump form in my throat. "Really, Grandma? You mean it?" "Yes, I do. You're not just staying here, Julie. You're my family, and it's time we made that clear to everyone else too." A few weeks later, it was done. We went to court, and I officially became Julie Bennett, with a new sense of belonging that I had longed for since Mom sent me away. With Grandma's support, I started looking towards the future. She encouraged me to focus on my studies, particularly science, which had always fascinated me. "You've got a sharp mind for it, Julie. You could go into medicine. How would you like that?" she suggested one day as we were going over some of my school projects. "I'd love that, Grandma. I want to help people," I replied, the idea taking root. "Then it's settled. We'll get you into a good college program. I'll support you every step of the way," she declared, her determination clear. True to her word, Grandma was there for me throughout my high school years. She tutored me in math and science, using her old school methods that were strict but effective. "You need to understand the basics, Julie. Can't skip the foundation," she'd insist whenever I struggled with complex problems. I graduated with top marks, thanks to her unwavering support. Grandma then helped me navigate the daunting college applications process. When I got accepted into a medical college with a partial scholarship, she was as proud as if she'd received the acceptance herself. "We'll manage the finances. Don't you worry about that," Grandma said when I fretted over the costs. "You focus on your studies. Become the best doctor you can be." Medical school was tough, but fulfilling. I was drawn to oncology, the branch of medicine that dealt with cancer. It was hard, emotionally and intellectually, but it felt right, like I was exactly where I needed to be. I completed my degree, then my internship, and finally, my residency, each step a milestone that Grandma celebrated. "You're making a real difference, Julie. I'm so proud of you," she'd say, her eyes shining with pride. By the time I turned 32, I was fully established in my career as an oncologist. My life was busy but fulfilling, filled with long hours at the hospital and the satisfaction of knowing I was making a difference. Through it all, Grandma was my anchor, always there to listen and offer advice on tough days. But life, as it often does, threw another curveball my way. Grandma's health, which had been declining, took a turn for the worse. It was swift and unexpected, the kind of decline that leaves you scrambling to catch your breath. I remember coming home one evening, tired after a particularly tough day at the hospital. Grandma was sitting in her favorite armchair, looking out the window. Her voice was weaker when she called me over. "Julie, come sit with me for a bit," she said, patting the chair next to her. I sat down, taking her hand in mine. It felt fragile, like a dried leaf that might crumble under too much pressure. "I'm not going to beat around the bush," she started, her tone serious. "The doctors, they say it's not much time now. We need to talk about things, practical things." The lump in my throat grew, my eyes stung with tears. "Grandma, please." She squeezed my hand, her grip still strong. "No tears now, Julie. We've got things to sort out. You need to be ready." The next few weeks were a blur of doctor's visits, late nights, and legal paperwork. Grandma wanted to ensure everything was in order for me, that there would be no complications with her estate or her wishes. When the end came, it was peaceful. Grandma passed away in her sleep, at home, just as she'd wanted. The emptiness her passing left was palpable, a silence in the house that was too heavy to bear at times. Planning the funeral was hard. I went through her address book, calling relatives and friends. The responses were polite, some even warm, but it became clear that not many would make the effort to come. My heart ached, not just for the loss of Grandma, but for the loneliness of this farewell. The funeral day was quiet, the chapel more empty than not. I stood there, feeling oddly detached as the priest spoke about life, loss, and legacy. It didn't take long after the funeral when the past I thought I'd left behind came knocking at my door. My mother, stepfather, and their daughter, who was now 20 years old, showed up unexpectedly. My mother didn't waste any time. "Julie, you need to share the inheritance your grandmother left you," she demanded, her tone entitled. I stared at them, disbelief mixing with anger. "You left me, remember? 20 years ago, you decided I was too much of a burden." My mother's face twisted into a sneer. "Ungrateful girl. Now you're a rich doctor with an inheritance. You owe us." I laughed, the sound bitter. "Grandma adopted me. Legally, you're nothing to me now." The shock on her face was almost comical. My stepfather, ever the bully, leaned in. "You're going to regret this, Julie." As they left, I slammed the door behind them, the click of the lock sounding unusually satisfying. Standing there, my back against the door, I felt a mix of relief and renewed determination. A few days after their first visit, I was at work when I got a call from a neighbor. "Julie, it looks like your family's at your house again. They've been bringing in furniture, looks like they're moving in or something." When I pulled into the driveway, the sight of their car parked out front made my stomach churn. I walked in to find my mother, stepfather, and stepsister unpacking boxes in the living room, acting as if they owned the place. "What are you doing?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. My mother turned around, feigning surprise. "Oh, Julie. We're just settling in. After all, this is family property." "No, it's not. This is my house, legally left to me by Grandma. You need to leave. Now." My stepfather stepped forward, a smirk on his face. "Make us. We're family, and we deserve a part of this house." I could feel the rage bubbling inside me. "You haven't been family for over 20 years. You can't just come here and claim what's mine." My stepsister, watching from the side, finally piped up. "Come on, Julie, don't be so heartless. We're just asking for what's fair." "Fair?" I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "What's fair about abandoning a child? What's fair about only showing up when you think there's money to be had?" They had no answers, just scowls and muttered curses. "I'm calling the police," I declared, pulling out my phone. My mother tried to stop me. "You'll regret this, Julie. I've regretted knowing you for years. This is nothing new." I shot back as I dialed 911. The police arrived quickly. I explained the situation, showing them the legal documents proving my ownership of the house and Grandma's will. The officers were firm. "You need to leave," one of them told my mother and stepfather. "This property doesn't belong to you, and if you don't comply, you'll be removed forcibly." My stepfather glared at me, his anger clear, but there was nothing he could do. "This isn't over, Julie," he threatened as they gathered their things. "Oh, but it is," I replied, my tone cold and final. After they were gone, I walked through the house, through Grandma's house. Each room was filled with memories, each corner a testament to her love and the life she had built here, a life she had fought to pass on to me. Standing in her favorite spot by the window, I made a promise, not just to her, but to myself. I would not let the bitterness of the past tarnish my future. I had fought hard to become who I was, and I would continue to fight, to honor her legacy and the sacrifices she had made for me. Hi there, I'm Claire. I'm 27 and I work as a smartphone app developer. I'm pretty much a homebody, love my peace and quiet, and prefer a good book or coding session to loud parties any day. My social circle is small, and dating has always been kind of a disaster for me. But all that changed one random day at a gift shop. I was just browsing, not looking for anything in particular, when I noticed this guy looking totally lost. He was standing there with a ceramic cat in one hand and a scented candle in the other, looking like he had no clue what he was doing. I couldn't help but laugh a little. "Need some help?" I asked, walking over to him. He looked up, looking relieved. "Oh God, yes. I'm trying to find something for my mom's birthday, but I'm completely clueless." I smiled. "Well, let's see what we can find. How about a nice vase? Moms love vases." "Yeah? That sounds good. I'm Tom, by the way." "Nice to meet you, Tom. I'm Claire." We spent the next few minutes chatting and looking at different vases. Tom was funny, making jokes about his lack of shopping skills, and I found myself laughing more than I had in a long time. After we found a vase he liked, we went to the checkout counter together. As we waited in line, he turned to me with a hopeful look. "Hey, Claire, would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime? I mean, if you're not too busy with all that app developing." I hesitated for a moment, but there was something about Tom that made me want to say yes. "Sure, why not? Coffee sounds good." We swapped phone numbers, and I left the store feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. I hadn't been on a date in a while, and I wasn't sure what to expect. But Tom seemed different, genuine, funny, and easy to talk to. A few days later, Tom texted me, and we arranged to meet at a cozy little coffee shop downtown. I arrived a bit early, nerves bubbling in my stomach, but when I saw Tom walk in, smiling and waving, I felt instantly at ease. We ordered our coffees and found a quiet corner to sit and chat. Tom was easy to talk to, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about our jobs, our favorite movies, and even our worst dating experiences, laughing over shared stories of awkward first dates. We'd been dating for a few months, and it was time for the next big step, meeting his parents. I was nervous, but Tom assured me they were nice people. When we got there, his mom, Mrs. Harris, greeted us at the door. She was a stern-looking woman with a cane, her eyes sharp and assessing. Tom's dad, Mr. Harris, was sitting in an armchair, barely looking up from his newspaper. "Mom, Dad, this is Claire," Tom introduced me with a big smile. "Hello, dear," Mrs. Harris said, looking me up and down. "Tom's told us a lot about you. Please, call me Evelyn. Come in, sit down." I sat on the edge of the couch, feeling like I was under a spotlight. Mr. Harris grunted a hello, but didn't say much else. "So, Claire," Evelyn started. "Tom tells us you work in tech?" "Yeah, I'm a smartphone app developer," I replied, hoping to keep things simple. Mr. Harris snorted from his chair. "Playing with toys, huh?" I forced a smile. "Not quite. It's more about creating useful tools for people." Evelyn leaned in, her eyes narrowing. "And how's the pay in that field? Decent, I hope?" I felt my cheeks flush. "It's good enough. I'm comfortable." Tom jumped in, trying to change the subject. "Mom, Dad, Claire's got a beautiful house. She inherited it from her grandmother." "Oh, really?" Evelyn's eyebrows shot up. "Where is it?" "It's not far from here. It's a cozy place, just the right size for me." Just then, Mr. Harris folded his newspaper and stood up. "I'm going to check the garden," he muttered, leaving the room. We walked outside, and I felt some of the tension ease away. Tom's parents were definitely a bit intense, but I could handle it. As we strolled through the garden, Tom looked at me with concern. "Sorry about my mom," he said quietly. "She can be a bit much." "It's okay, Tom. I can handle it," I replied, squeezing his hand. "She just wants the best for you." We spent a bit more time in the garden before heading back inside. Evelyn was waiting, her eyes still sharp but less intense. "Did you enjoy the garden, Claire?" she asked. "Yes, it's beautiful. You have a lovely home." "Thank you, dear. We're very proud of it." We chatted a bit more, and I started to feel a bit more relaxed. It wasn't the easiest conversation, but it was a start. As we got ready to leave, Evelyn gave me a quick hug. "Thank you for coming, Claire. It was nice to meet you." A few months after meeting Tom's parents, we decided to get married. We both agreed on a simple ceremony, nothing flashy. I never liked big weddings, and Tom was on board with that. His parents weren't too thrilled, but they went along with it. The wedding day was pretty low-key. We had it at a small park, just a handful of friends and family. I wore a simple dress, and Tom looked good in his suit. After the ceremony, we had a small reception at a nearby cafe. It was simple, just good food and close friends. Tom's parents were there, of course. Evelyn, his mom, looked around with a critical eye but seemed more relaxed than usual. "Congratulations, dear," Evelyn said, giving me a quick hug. "The ceremony was nice." "Thanks, Mrs. Harris. I'm glad you came," I replied, trying to keep things friendly. We mingled with our guests, keeping the atmosphere laid back. Our friends were cracking jokes and making toasts, and it was nice to see everyone enjoying themselves. We didn't have a traditional wedding cake, just a bunch of cupcakes for everyone. I picked out a chocolate one and took a bite. "These are good," I said, offering Tom a bite. "Yeah, they are," he agreed, getting frosting on his nose. As the night went on, I felt more relaxed and happy. It wasn't a grand event, but it was exactly what I wanted, a simple celebration with the people who mattered most. At the end of the night, Tom and I said our goodbyes and headed to my house, which was now our home. The house was perfect for us, with ramps and low steps, designed for my late grandmother's comfort. As we walked in, Tom's mom, Evelyn, looked around with a gleam in her eye. "This house is very convenient, Claire. Perfect for someone like me," she said, giving me a meaningful look. "Yeah, it's been great," I replied, feeling a bit uneasy. Evelyn kept looking around, clearly impressed. "This place is really something. Your grandmother must have been quite thoughtful." As the evening wound down, I couldn't shake the feeling that Evelyn had plans of her own. But for now, I focused on starting my new life with Tom, hoping for the best. So, things had been pretty smooth after the wedding. Tom and I were settling into our routine when everything took a sharp turn. It all started one evening when his parents came over for dinner. Evelyn, Tom's mom, was looking around the house with that same gleam in her eye. "It must be hard for you two to keep up with such a big house." I shrugged, not sure where this was going. "We manage. It's not too bad." Later, as we sat down to dinner, Evelyn dropped the bombshell. "Claire, Tom, I've been thinking. My house is just too difficult for me to navigate. I think it would be best if I moved in here." I almost choked on my food. "Move in here? With us?" "Yes," she said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "It's just so much easier for me here." I looked at Tom, expecting him to say something, but he just nodded. "Mom has a point, Claire. It would be easier for her." I couldn't believe it. "Tom, we didn't even discuss this." "We're discussing it now," Evelyn said, her tone firm. "It's really the best solution." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "We need to think about this. It's a big decision." The next day, I came home from work to find movers unloading Evelyn and Mr. Harris's stuff into my house. I was furious. "What's going on here?" Tom met me at the door, looking sheepish. "Mom and Dad are moving in. Claire, it's just for a while. They need a place that's easier for them." Evelyn walked in, acting like she owned the place. "Claire, we need to move some furniture around to make it easier for me to get around." I was still trying to process what was happening. "What do you mean, move things around?" "The bedroom on the ground floor, for starters. It's the best room for us." "That's our bedroom, Evelyn," I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "Well, you'll have to move upstairs. I need the ground floor room." I looked at Tom, hoping he'd back me up. "We're family, Claire. Families help each other out," he said, like it was the simplest thing. I had no choice but to go along with it. The movers finished up, and before I knew it, Evelyn and Mr. Harris were settled into our bedroom, and Tom and I were crammed into the smaller upstairs room. Over the next few days, Evelyn made herself right at home. She didn't lift a finger around the house, always saying her leg was too sore to help. I was left to cook, clean, and take care of everything while Tom acted like nothing was wrong. One evening, after a particularly long day, I sat down with Tom. "Tom, this isn't working. We need to set some boundaries." Evelyn, who had been eavesdropping, walked in. "Claire, if you have something to say it to my face." I stood up, my anger boiling over. "Fine. You're taking over my house, Evelyn. You need to help out more around here." Evelyn's face hardened. "I'm a guest here, Claire. I shouldn't have to lift a finger." I stormed upstairs, feeling trapped and frustrated. My house didn't feel like my home anymore, and I didn't know how to fix it. The invasion had begun, and I was stuck in the middle, trying to hold on to the life I had built. After Evelyn and Mr. Harris moved in, my life turned upside down. I was used to my space and routine, but now everything revolved around them. I was even forced to switch to working from home for a whole month to establish a normal life. Every morning, I'd wake up early to make breakfast. Evelyn always had a list of specific things she wanted. "Claire, I need my tea a certain way. Make sure it's not too hot, and don't forget the lemon," she'd say, her voice carrying from the kitchen. After breakfast, I'd clean up the kitchen while Evelyn watched her morning shows. "Claire, can you turn up the volume? My hearing isn't what it used to be," she'd call out. Once the kitchen was clean, I'd try to get some work done. I'd set up my laptop in the small upstairs room Tom and I now shared. But it was hard to focus with the TV blasting downstairs and Evelyn calling for me every few minutes. I'd run up and down the stairs all day, trying to keep everyone happy. It was exhausting. I felt like I was losing my mind, trying to juggle my job and their constant demands. One afternoon, I finally snapped. I was in the middle of a video call with my team when Evelyn barged in. "Claire, I need you to run to the store. We're out of my favorite cookies." I muted my mic and turned to her, trying to stay calm. "Evelyn, I'm in the middle of a work call. Can it wait?" "No, it can't. I need those cookies," she insisted, crossing her arms. I took a deep breath, feeling my patience wear thin. "You'll have to wait. I can't just drop everything." Evelyn stormed out, mumbling about how things used to be different in her day. I unmuted my mic, forcing a smile from my team. "Sorry about that, everyone. Let's get back to it." After the call, I went downstairs, hoping for a moment of peace. But Evelyn was waiting for me, a scowl on her face. "You're not being very accommodating. We're guests in your home, and you need to treat us with more respect." I was about to argue back when Tom walked in, looking tired. "What's going on here?" "Your wife is being difficult," Evelyn said, turning to him. "Claire, you need to be more patient. Mom's not asking for much," he said, clearly siding with her. "Not asking for much? She's driving me crazy, Tom." I snapped, feeling the tears well up. Evelyn gasped, putting a hand to her chest. "How dare you speak to me like that in my son's house?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Your son's house?" "This is my house, Evelyn." "Enough, Claire," Tom said, stepping in. "We're all family here. Let's just try to get along." I stared at him, feeling completely alone. "Fine, whatever," I muttered, turning away. A month later, I returned to my usual office work and finally breathed a sigh of relief. Unfortunately, this did not free me from household chores. I'm really tired. Life at home had become a real mess after my return to the office. Every day was a struggle with Evelyn and Mr. Harris, constantly needing something. Then, one night at dinner, Evelyn dropped a bombshell. "Claire, you're not keeping up with the housework," Evelyn said, looking at me over her glasses. "I think you should work from home more. Just like before. You'd have more time to manage things here." I stared at her, stunned. Work from home? Evelyn, I love my team and my job. Going to the office is my only break from all this. Tom jumped in, siding with her. Claire, Mom's right. If you're home more, it'll be easier for everyone. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Easier for everyone? What about me? I need a break from all the noise and demands here. Evelyn crossed her arms, looking stern. Claire, I need care. My leg gives me a lot of trouble, and it's hard for me to do things on my own. I felt cornered, their eyes on me, pushing me to agree. I can't just switch to working from home. I need to talk to my boss. The next day, I called my boss and explained the situation. He was understanding and allowed me to work from home. But as soon as I made the switch, things got worse. Evelyn and Mr. Harris turned into a constant source of interruptions. Claire, I need you to make lunch. And don't forget the special soup I like, Evelyn would call out. Claire, the TV isn't working. Fix it, Mr. Harris would demand, even though it was just a matter of pressing a button. And the TV was always blaring at full volume, making it impossible for me to concentrate on my work. I tried talking to Tom about it one evening. Tom, I can't keep working from home like this. Your parents are driving me crazy with their demands. Claire, they need us. You need to be more understanding, he replied, dismissing my concerns. I'm trying to be understanding, Tom, but I'm burning out here. I need some peace to do my job, I said, my voice shaking. You're overreacting, Claire. Just try harder, he said, not even looking at me. I felt like I was losing my mind. Every day was a new demand, a new interruption. I was mentally and physically drained. The house, which used to be my sanctuary, had become a place of constant stress and noise. One day, after yet another interruption, I couldn't take it anymore. Evelyn had barged in, demanding I fix the TV again while I was on an important call. I snapped, slamming my laptop shut and storming downstairs. Enough! I can't do this anymore. I shouted, my voice echoing through the house. I'm tired, Evelyn. I can't work with all this noise and constant interruptions. I'm not your maid or your personal assistant. Tom came rushing in. Claire, calm down. What's going on? I'm done, Tom. I can't keep sacrificing my job and my sanity for your parents. This has to stop, I said, tears streaming down my face. Tom looked at me, his face serious. Claire, you need to get a grip. We're all trying our best here. I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and despair. I've reached my breaking point, Tom. Something has to change, or I can't stay here. The room fell silent, my words hanging in the air. I knew things couldn't go on like this, and I needed to find a way to reclaim my life, no matter what it took. So, we were all having dinner, me, Tom, and his parents. I'd had enough of the constant stress, and I decided it was time to speak up. Listen, everyone, I started, putting down my fork. We need to talk. It's getting too hard for all of us to live in this house together. We need to figure out a way to separate. Evelyn, my mother-in-law, jumped in before I could finish. I agree, Claire. This house is very comfortable and suits someone like me perfectly. Since it's so convenient for me, you should be the one to move out. I stared at her, stunned. You're telling me to leave my own house? She nodded, looking very pleased with herself. Yes, dear. It's only logical. This house is perfect for an elderly person like me. I turned to Tom, hoping he'd support me. Tom, are you okay with this? He shrugged, avoiding my eyes. It's fine with me, Claire. Maybe it's best if you find another place. I'll hire a nurse for Mom, so she's taken care of. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were pushing me out of my own home. I realized then that Tom and his parents were taking advantage of me and trying to drive me out. I got up from the table, feeling a strange calm wash over me. All right then, I said, smiling. I picked up my phone and dialed the movers. Evelyn and Mr. Harris exchanged pleased looks, thinking I was leaving. Good decision, Claire. It's better this way, Evelyn said, almost smugly. But I had other plans. Yes, I'd like to schedule a move, I said into the phone. Please send a team to pack up my in-laws' belongings and move them out of my house. Evelyn's face went pale. What are you doing? You can't kick us out. Yes, I can, Evelyn. This is my house, I said firmly. Tom jumped up, furious. Claire, if you make my parents leave, I'll go with them. I looked at him, feeling strangely calm. Fine by me, Tom. I'd be glad to see you go. He looked shocked, not expecting that response. You don't mean that. I do, Tom. I'll send you the divorce papers tomorrow. Evelyn started to cry, calling me a cruel girl. How can you do this to us, Claire? We're family. I shook my head. Family doesn't treat each other like this, Evelyn. You pushed me too far. The movers arrived within the hour. Evelyn and Mr. Harris had to pack their things, cursing and complaining the whole time. You're heartless, Claire. Evelyn yelled as she packed her belongings. I'm just standing up for myself, Evelyn. You should have respected my boundaries, I replied, watching her pack. As they loaded their things onto the truck, Evelyn kept shouting about how I was throwing out a sick, elderly woman. But I didn't budge. I stood my ground and watched them leave, knowing I was finally taking back control of my life. Once they were gone, the house felt strangely quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet. I knew I'd made the right decision, and I was ready to move on with my life, free from their demands and manipulations. After I kicked Tom and his parents out, I knew what I had to do. I filed for divorce and cut all ties with them. It was tough, but I felt free for the first time in ages. I went back to my job at the smartphone app development company, and I finally started enjoying my work again without all the chaos at home. I heard through the grapevine that Tom was still living with his parents, and they were becoming even more moody and unbearable. It didn't surprise me. They always needed someone to lean on, and now Tom was stuck dealing with it all. One day, out of the blue, Tom called me. I was surprised to see his name on my phone. I hesitated but decided to answer. Hello? Hey, Claire, it's Tom, he said, sounding nervous. Yeah, I know. What do you want, Tom? I asked, keeping my voice steady. I've been thinking a lot about us, and I realize I made a huge mistake. I want to make things right, he said, his voice shaky. I sighed, already feeling tired of this conversation. Tom, it's over. We've been through this. I know, but I'm serious. I'm ready to cut ties with my parents if that's what it takes. I want you back, Claire, he pleaded. It's not just about your parents, Tom. The problem was with you. You never stood up for me, and you let them walk all over us, I said, trying to stay calm. I know I messed up, but I can change. I'm ready to put you first now, he insisted. I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. Tom, it's too late for that. You had your chance to stand by me, and you didn't. I've moved on. I put down the phone, feeling a strange mix of emotions. It was sad, but also liberating. I had made the right decision for myself, and I wasn't going to go back to that toxic situation. In the following weeks, I threw myself into my work. My team noticed the change in me, and my boss even commented on how much more focused and productive I was. I also reconnected with some old friends and started going out more. It felt good to have a social life again without the constant stress hanging over me. One evening, I was out with my best friend, Sarah. We were having drinks at our favorite bar, catching up on everything. So, how's the single life treating you? Sarah asked, grinning. Honestly, it's great. I feel like I've got my life back. No more drama, no more stress, I said, raising my glass. We laughed and talked about all the things we wanted to do now that I was free. I even started thinking about taking a vacation, something I hadn't done in years. My name's Elizabeth. I teach science at a private school, and thanks to my folks having a bit of money, I've had a cushy life so far. But let's not get into that, it's not like I flaunt it. Every morning, before the sun gets too bold, I lace up my sneakers and hit the park trails for a run. There's this elderly lady, Mrs. Ramsey, who parks herself on the same bench every morning. She just sits there watching the lot of us run laps, like we're on some reality show. One crisp morning, as I slowed down for a breather near her usual spot, she called out to me. "Good morning. You're quite the regular, aren't you?" she said, her voice surprisingly strong for someone her age. "Yeah, I try to be," I replied, wiping the sweat off my brow. "Helps me keep sane." She chuckled. "I bet it does. I'm Marjorie, by the way. Marjorie Ramsey." "Elizabeth," I said, stretching my legs a bit. "Nice to meet you, Marjorie." Marjorie patted the spot next to her. "Mind if I give you some company while you catch your breath?" I sat down, figuring a little chat wouldn't hurt. "Not at all. Do you come here just to watch us run?" "Partly," she admitted with a mischievous grin. "But I also like the fresh air, and I've been looking for someone." "Looking for someone? In the park?" I frowned, a bit puzzled. "Not like that, dear," she laughed. "I've been on the lookout for a suitable young woman." I raised an eyebrow. "Suitable for what exactly?" "For my son," she said bluntly. "He needs a good wife." I almost choked on my water. "Come again?" "You heard me," Marjorie said, her eyes scanning my face. "My son, he's a good man. Successful, kind, but terribly shy. I figured it's time he settled down." "And you're scouting in the park?" I couldn't help but laugh. It was bizarre, really. "If you see what I see, dear, you'd understand. Healthy, smart women in their prime. Like you," she explained, her gaze firm yet kind. I shook my head, still amused by the absurdity of it all. "So, what does this son of yours even think about his mom picking out girls for him?" Marjorie shrugged. "Michael trusts my judgment. He knows I just want him to be happy." I stood up, ready to continue my run. "Well, good luck with that, Marjorie. It was nice meeting you." As I jogged away, her words lingered in my mind. It was definitely one of the weirder conversations I'd had. Little did I know, that wouldn't be the last I'd hear from Marjorie Ramsey or her mysterious son. Curiosity got the best of me. After that strange chat with Marjorie about her son needing a wife, I couldn't shake off the peculiarity of it all. A month passed since our park bench recruitment session, and I received a casual invitation for dinner at her place. "Just a friendly dinner, with a bit of family," her message said. Why I agreed, I'll never know. Maybe I was just looking for a story to laugh about later with my friends. I dressed simple, but nice, figuring I'd blend in better if I didn't look like I was trying too hard. I drove over to the address she gave me, an old-fashioned house with a welcoming glow in the windows. Marjorie greeted me at the door with a warmth that felt genuine. "Elizabeth, I'm so glad you could make it. Come in, come in." The house was cozy, filled with the scent of something delicious. She led me into the dining room where a few people gathered around a large table. "Everyone, this is Elizabeth, the lovely young woman I met at the park." A man, who must have been her husband, stood up first, a big grin on his face. "Pleasure to meet you. I'm Harold, Marjorie's other half." Next to him, a younger man, clearly the son, extended his hand. "Hi, I'm Michael. Mom has told me quite a bit about you." His handshake was firm, his smile shy but kind. I couldn't help but notice he wasn't what I expected. He seemed normal, nice even. And then a woman around my age, with a friendly face, came over with her arm extended. "I'm Anna, Michael's sister. And don't worry, we're not all in on this matchmaking scheme." Her tone was teasing, and I relaxed a bit, laughing with her. "Glad to hear it," I replied. We settled around the table, and the conversation flowed surprisingly easily. Michael was a software developer, not the entrepreneur Marjorie had embellished him to be, and Anna worked as a graphic designer. As we ate, Marjorie couldn't help herself. Elizabeth teaches science at a private school, you know. Quite the brainy one. Mom, let's not start selling her credentials. Michael chuckled, his cheeks reddening a bit. The food was great, and the company was unexpectedly enjoyable. Michael was easy to talk to, his interests broad and his humor gentle. Anna was a riot, her sharp wit making me laugh more than I had in weeks. Michael helped clear the table, and I found myself helping, the two of us falling into an easy rhythm. Sorry about all this, he murmured as we stacked dishes in the kitchen. Mom means well, but she can be a bit much. It's fine, really. I've enjoyed getting to know everyone, I said honestly. As I drove home later that night, I reflected on the evening. It had been nothing like I expected. No pressure, just good food and good people. Maybe Marjorie was a bit unconventional in her methods, but her family was alright. The next day, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was Michael. Hey, Elizabeth, he started, sounding a bit nervous. Would you like to meet up, just the two of us this time? Maybe at a cafe downtown? I was taken aback, but pleased. Yeah, that sounds great. We met up the next day, and without the family around, it was even easier to talk. We laughed a lot, shared stories, and before we knew it, a couple of hours had flown by. As we left the cafe, Michael said, I had a really good time today. Would you like to do this again? Definitely, I agreed, already looking forward to it. Driving home, I couldn't help but feel excited about what was next. Maybe Marjorie was onto something after all, even if her methods were a bit unconventional. After that coffee date with Michael, things just took off like a shot. We started seeing each other almost every other day. It wasn't anything fancy at first, just casual meetups after work, grabbing a bite or catching a movie. But it was clear, at least to me, that there was something there. Something that felt like it could turn into a lot more. One chilly evening, Michael picked me up from school. We drove out to the coast, which was his surprise plan to watch the sunset. It was pretty cold, but he brought along a thick blanket. We sat on the hood of his car, wrapped in the blanket, watching the sky change colors. It was quiet except for the sound of the waves and the occasional laugh from us. Suddenly, he turned to me, his face serious for once. Elizabeth, I've been thinking, he started, hesitating a bit. These past weeks with you have been, well, amazing. I'm not good with words, but I really like you. A lot. I smiled, feeling the warmth not just from the blanket but from what he was saying. I like you too, Michael. A lot. I mimicked his tone, and we both laughed. From then on, things just seemed to fall into place. We met each other's friends, and even though my pals were a bit skeptical at first, given how we met, they soon saw what I saw in him. Michael was straightforward, no airs about him. He liked simple things, a good burger, classic movies, and long walks. 6 months flew by, and every day felt a bit brighter than the last. I knew I was falling in love with him, not just because he was kind and funny, but because he made everything seem straightforward, no complications, just us. One evening, while we were having dinner at my place, Michael got unusually quiet. After a while, he took a deep breath, reached across the table, and held my hand. Elizabeth, these months with you, they've been the happiest of my life, he said, his voice steady but intense. I know I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me? It wasn't a fancy proposal. No kneeling, no ring in the champagne. But it was real, it was sincere, and it was us. I didn't need a second to think it over. Yes, Michael. Absolutely, yes, I answered, my heart racing with joy. We got married quietly, just a small ceremony with family and a few friends. It was perfect, just like everything with him seemed to be. We moved into my apartment, merging our lives and belongings, which surprisingly took little effort. Settling into married life with Michael was like slipping into a comfortable rhythm we both seemed to naturally follow. Mornings were filled with quick coffees and kisses goodbye, evenings were for cooking together or sometimes just ordering in when we felt lazy. Life was good, simple, and happy. But just when I thought things couldn't get any better, I found out I was pregnant. The day I found out, I was a bundle of nerves. I waited for Michael to come home, the positive test clutched in my hand. When he walked through the door, looking tired from the day but smiling as soon as he saw me, I blurted it out. "Michael, we're going to have a baby." His face froze for a second, and then a cautious smile crept up. "Really? Wow, that's amazing, Liz." He hugged me, but there was a hesitancy in his voice that I hadn't expected. I brushed it off as shock. After all, it was big news. We told his parents the following weekend over dinner at their place. I thought they'd be over the moon, considering they'd dropped hints about grandkids since the day we got married. Marjorie's reaction was all smiles. "That's wonderful news, dear. Isn't that wonderful, Harold?" Harold just nodded, his usual chatty self somewhat subdued. "Yes, very good news." The enthusiasm seemed forced, and I caught Michael watching his father closely, a frown forming when he thought no one was looking. After we announced the pregnancy at a family dinner, everyone reacted more or less positively, except for Anna, who seemed visibly upset. I found a moment to talk to her after dinner. "Hey, Anna, you okay? You seemed a bit down earlier." She sighed, looking away before meeting my eyes. "It's just that. I can't have kids, Liz. Found out a while back. Even led to my divorce. It's tough seeing everyone else move on, you know?" Her confession hit me hard. Here I was, wrapped up in my own drama, not seeing her pain. I reached out, squeezing her hand. "I'm so sorry, Anna. I had no idea." She managed a small smile. "It's not your fault. I'm happy for you, really. Just takes me a bit to adjust sometimes." As my belly grew, so did the awkwardness around Michael's family. They were polite but distant, which was a stark contrast to their initial excitement about the potential for grandchildren. Michael himself was supportive but increasingly distant. His once warm cuddles now felt like he was holding back. Things got weirder with his parents too. The usual Sunday dinners became less frequent, and when we did go, Marjorie and Harold hardly asked about the pregnancy. They talked about everything else, Anna's new job, Harold's golf games, even the neighbor's landscaping, anything but the upcoming grandchild. During one particularly tense visit, I overheard Marjorie whispering to Michael in the kitchen. "Make sure everything's ready for the baby." Michael's reply was low, but I caught the tail end of it. "I know, Mom. I'm on top of it." What was there to be on top of? His vague, cryptic responses and the lack of enthusiasm were starting to wear me down. Giving birth to my son was the most surreal experience of my life. There he was, this perfect little human that Michael and I created, and he was all ours. But the bliss of becoming a mother got a rude awakening the very next day. It was early morning, not long after the nurses had shifted shifts, when one of them came into my room. She looked around quickly, a bit too nervously for a regular checkup. "I need to take him for some special procedures," she muttered, reaching for my son's crib. "Special procedures?" I echoed, my voice hoarse from exhaustion. "What kind of procedures?" No one mentioned anything about taking him away. She paused, her hands hovering over my baby. "It's just routine, ma'am. We need to run a few tests." I reached out, my instinct screaming at me to keep my baby close. "I'd like to see some kind of order for that." "Can you bring me the paperwork?" I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. The nurse blinked, taken aback. I'll be right back," she stammered, and hurried out, without my son. Something about that interaction didn't sit right with me. I pressed the call button for another nurse, wanting more answers, but before anyone came, the shift changed, and the atmosphere seemed to calm down. That night, however, the same nurse returned. It was late, the dim lights in my hospital room casting long shadows. She didn't see that I was still awake, my eyes barely closed. In her arms was another baby, not mine, and she was tiptoeing towards my son's crib. Adrenaline shot through me. Ignoring the pain in my body, I got up and confronted her. "What are you doing? Who's that child?" The nurse jumped, nearly dropping the infant she held. I got the rooms mixed up," she stammered, her face pale. "Rooms mixed up? Really? Twice in one day with the same baby?" I snapped, my heart racing. The baby in her arms began to cry, and the nurse quickly turned and left, almost running from my room. I was left shaking, clutching my son to my chest, too scared to let him go even for a second. Come morning, the whole incident felt like a nightmare. I called my mom, recounting the events, my voice trembling. "Sweetheart, it's probably just your hormones going wild. You just had a baby, it's normal to feel overprotective," she soothed. Was I being paranoid? No, something was wrong, but my exhausted mind struggled to piece it together. Later that day, I was discharged and went home. Michael was there, waiting for us. His reaction, however, was not what I expected. He looked at our son, his expression unreadable and distant. "Isn't he perfect?" I tried to break the ice, handing our son to him. "Yeah, sure," Michael responded flatly, his interaction lacking any warmth. I watched, a sinking feeling in my gut, as he handed our son back to me much too quickly. "I've got to catch up on some work," he muttered and disappeared into his home office. It's been a year since I brought my son into this world, a year that should have been filled with shared smiles and family warmth. Instead, it's been the most confusing and cold period of my life. Michael, who once promised to stand by me through everything, now spends most of his time at work. When he is home, it's like he's just a shadow passing through our lives, barely noticing his own son. The change wasn't sudden. It crept up on us, gradually, like a slow-moving storm cloud. I noticed it first when, despite all the excitement of his parents about having a grandson, they lost interest almost immediately after he was born. Their enthusiasm shifted in ways I couldn't understand. One afternoon, Anna, Michael's sister, dropped by with a toddler. She was glowing with a new kind of joy. "I adopted him," she told me, her eyes lighting up. "Mom suggested I look into adoption, and well, here he is." She introduced me to a bright-eyed little boy, who clung to her with shy curiosity. I was happy for her, truly, but I couldn't help but notice the lavish attention her son received from my in-laws. Toys, clothes, endless visits, Anna's son received everything. And my son? It was as if he didn't exist in their world. Michael didn't seem bothered by his parents' blatant favoritism. He spent whatever little time he had at home talking to Anna about her son, completely ignoring our child who yearned for just a fraction of that attention. I tried talking to Michael about it. One evening, after another dinner where Michael had excused himself early to work, I confronted him. "Michael, we need to talk. It's about our son," I started, my voice steady despite the churn of emotions inside me. "You've missed his first words, his first steps. You don't see him, Michael. And neither do your parents. What's going on?" Michael sighed, finally shutting his laptop with a snap. "Liz, you're making it into a bigger deal than it is. We're busy, that's all." "Too busy for your own son?" My voice cracked, the hurt too deep to mask. "Why do your parents shower Anna's son with affection and ignore ours?" "It's just different, Liz. Anna's situation is different." He was evasive, his words doing nothing to soothe the growing rift between us. Over the next few weeks, I watched as Anna's child received all the love and attention from his grandparents that my son should have been getting. It wasn't just the gifts. It was the visits, the cuddles, the photos taken and shared with pride. Meanwhile, my son's milestones went unnoticed, his achievements uncelebrated. I was fed up, truly exhausted from the constant coldness and secrets. It came to a head during a family dinner, which was as tense as ever. I was determined to have it out with Michael, to demand answers about why everything had turned so sour. Just as I was about to speak, Michael, to my shock, beat me to it. "I need to talk to you," he said flatly, his eyes avoiding mine. "Fine," I replied. "I have things to say too." Michael's next words hit me like a freight train. "I don't love you anymore, Liz. I don't need you." His voice was cold, emotionless. My heart skipped. "What about your son? Our son?" He laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "I'm convinced you've been cheating. That kid isn't mine." His mother, sitting beside him, nodded her approval at his words. It was like a coordinated strike. Michael slid an envelope across the table. "Here are the divorce papers. I'm filing for a paternity test. When it shows that kid isn't mine, I'll be asking for compensation for your betrayal." I was speechless, my mind racing. Accusations of infidelity? Demands for compensation? This wasn't just cold, it was brutal. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I've never been unfaithful, and I'll take your test. You'll see you're wrong." My voice was shaking, but I was furious. As I left, his mother hurled insults at me, words so vile they made me tremble with anger. I left their house, the echo of her slurs following me out the door. Back at my place, I called my mom, who was livid when she heard what happened. "Remember that nurse incident at the hospital? Maybe it's time to dig deeper," she suggested. Taking her advice, I hired a private investigator and ordered a comprehensive DNA test, not just for Michael, but for his parents too. I needed to uncover everything, whatever the cost. A month later, armed with the results, I returned to face them. Michael, his sister, and her adopted son were all there, playing on the floor as if this was just another family gathering. His parents lounged on the couch, an air of smug satisfaction about them. Michael looked up with a sneer. "Well, what did the test show?" I opened the envelope, my hand steady, despite the pounding in my chest. "The test shows a 99% probability of paternity. Michael, you are the father of our son." I let the words hang in the air, watching his face fall. "And there's more," I continued, turning to his parents. "Michael's mother is biologically related to our son. But Michael's father is not his biological grandfather." The room went silent. The color drained from his mother's face, she looked from me to her husband, who was now standing, his expression one of betrayal and fury. "You," he shouted at her. "I knew it. You've been lying for years." She started crying, her hands covering her face as she confessed to years of deceit. "This is just the surface of it," I announced, my voice ringing clear and loud. "There's an entire scheme orchestrated by none other than my mother-in-law, with the knowing participation of Michael. Marjorie devised a plan to avoid the expenses of surrogacy by ensuring her son married a suitable candidate, me. A wealthy, healthy woman, selected specifically to bear a child for the purpose of inheriting the family's fortune." I continued, the words tasting bitter. "After my son was born, the next phase of their plan was to replace him with another child, a baby switched by a bribed nurse whom a private detective has since convinced to testify against you." Anna's eyes widened, her gaze flickering between her brother and her mother, betrayal written all over her face. And the cruelty didn't end there. This woman, I pointed directly at my mother-in-law, persuaded Anna to adopt a child she believed was mine, thinking she was raising her biological grandson. Anna's face crumpled, tears streaming down as she clutched the little boy closer to her chest. Her mother, my mother-in-law, had been sobbing moments before, her secrets exposed, her marriage crumbling. But at my accusation, she hardened, her tears drying as she turned to Anna. "He's not ours, Anna. It's best if he goes back." But Anna shook her head, her voice breaking, but resolute. "No, Mother. He's my son. I love him, and I won't let him go, because of your mistakes. Because of your actions, Michael, and you will face the consequences," I declared, my resolve as firm as the gavel I imagined in my hand. "I am suing for full custody of my son and for damages for the fraud attempted. You tried to steal my son and accuse me of infidelity, to strip me of everything." The court proceedings that followed were grueling but straightforward. Armed with irrefutable evidence and the testimony of the nurse, the judgment was swift. My mother-in-law received a sentence of 2 years for her role in the deception. Michael agreed to a settlement that included substantial financial support and alimony. As the judge pronounced the sentence, my soon-to-be ex-father-in-law, a man betrayed and broken, filed for divorce, severing the last ties that bound him to the woman he had once loved. Now, I focus on raising him in a world filled with love and devoid of deceit. Anna and her son are frequent visitors to our home, the children playing together as we support each other in our new lives.